Chapter 755. Under the witness of many night watchers, Dany and Erlu reached 3 basic agreements. 1. Immediately send out a warning to the northern warlords and remind them to prepare to cross the sea. 2. Inform the nobles in the south of the Neck Swamp to prepare to build a second and third defense line. 3. Confirm the location of the strange ghost king and then cooperate with the Dragon Queen and the Child of the Prophecy to try and kill him. Almost everyone believed that the strange ghost king might not go to the northern warlord's castle, but when attacking Winterfell, he would definitely appear. Therefore, Erlu and Dany would meet in Winterfell. Winterfell would become the main battlefield of the first Strange Ghost King War. After the meeting ended, Dany went to Pereston's crow's nest. The sanctuary is destroyed. In the scholar's study, she saw the red-eyed crow again. It was the black crow that was eavesdropping on their conversation from the small window. It was also one of Bran's crow avatars. To cross the Great Wall, the sanctuary must be destroyed first. The Winter Horn is also effective against the sanctuary's defense circle. The tombs that have existed for millions of years have turned into scorched earth in the flames. There is nothing left there. The raven's eyes flashed with human-like sorrow. Why didn't you discover the Winter Horn earlier? I don't know. It seems to have the help of fate and has been hiding in my blind spot. Before the sanctuary was destroyed, I had never even seen the Winter Horn, the raven said. Hee, that's because you haven't merged with the Green Prophet's seal, right? Now, you still have a large part of Bran Stark's humanity, Dany sneered. This has nothing to do with me. The Winter Horn had already appeared during the time of Blinden River One. Great, a 3-eyed crow that knows how to shirk responsibility. You are the only one in a million years. Dany continued to mock. Caw. 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 The raven excitedly flapped its wings and cawed loudly. I'm not trying to shirk responsibility. I just want to tell you that if Blinden can't do it, I can't do it either. None of the 3-eyed crows can be omniscient and omnipotent. We are still at the mercy of fate. The mockery on Dany's lips grew thicker. Normally, you people are omnipotent and do everything. You simply think of yourselves as God who arranges the fate of all living beings. At the critical moment, you suddenly become so useless, yet you still speak so confidently. The 3-eyed crow never acts recklessly, Raven said. Dany nodded in agreement. That's right. You can define whether your actions are reckless or not. Of course, you haven't done anything reckless. The 3-eyed crow didn't have any honor, and he didn't see the light of day. Yet, he shouldered a great responsibility, and he devoted his life selflessly. In fact, every decision he made and every thought he had wasn't his true thoughts. If possible, I would rather be Bran Stark for the rest of my life. Bran said sadly. Why did you look for me? Dany furrowed her brows and changed the topic. Bran was silent for a moment, and when he regained his composure, he said in a deep voice, you should repair the Great Wall and keep the spell formation in it working. The Great Wall has already collapsed, so what's the point of repairing the spell formation? You should block the cold wind from the north. Block the wind? You know that the shelter is the world's gate, right? Have you ever thought about what kind of world lies beyond the gate? Before Dany learned about the world's secrets, she would have said that the far north was the Arctic Circle, and if one went further north, one might reach the other end of the world. For example, Asia and the Barren Lands. You want to say that our world is like a house that isn't cold or hot, and it's only because of the cold wind from the north that the world's temperature drops? Then, the Great Wall is the house's gate, and it can block the cold wind and keep the house warm? The crow nodded and said, the long night has arrived, and the cold wind from the outside world is like an ice-cold flood. The Great Wall is the dam that blocks the flood. When the Great Wall was in good condition, it couldn't block all the ice and snow, let alone now that the Eastwatch section of the Great Wall has collapsed. Even if you repair the rest of the spell formation, the ice will still fill our world. But, this process will be greatly delayed. Stannis might be able to kill the King of Strange Ghosts. Do you think it's possible? The Black Crow asked. It's not completely impossible. If you are willing to help, the hope will be even greater. Danny looked at it with shining eyes. The Black Crow was silent for a long time, and sighed. After the long night, the river of fate seems to be shrouded in a layer of fog, and I can't see Stannis's final outcome. But, you are right, since Stannis is willing to risk his life, there is always a glimmer of hope. I agree, as long as I find a chance, I will do my best to help him. If he can really kill the King of Strange Ghosts, the long night will definitely not end immediately, but the world will at least be able to escape the state of sliding into the ice abyss. Erlu's willingness to risk his life is the key. He volunteered to fight at the front, and if he succeeded, Danny and Bran would save a lot of effort. If Erlu failed and died, they would be able to find out some information about the King of Strange Ghosts through that battle. The two reached a consensus, and the atmosphere became much more relaxed. Danny asked again, "Did you find any information about the Horn of Winter from the tree?" Jon accidentally picked it up at the fist peak of the ancestors, and then he gave it to Sam. Bran was not omniscient, but he was the Green Prophet after all. The tree recorded everything, and as long as he searched with a purpose, he could always find the information he wanted. So the strange ghost at the bottom of the ship was after the horn, and not Manslade's son. I was puzzled at the time. The son of the former king of savages didn't even like Stannis, so why would the strange ghost target him? Danny was a little embarrassed, but more than that, she was annoyed. She shouldn't have listened to the fatty back then. What was the use of sending the strange ghost to the City of Scholars? Alright, it was indeed a little useful. When those scholars saw the real strange ghost, they started to remind the vassals of the Seven Kingdoms to be on guard against the long night. But compared to the Great Wall, what was the use of the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms being on guard? Three-eyed Crow, you failed in your duty. The strange ghost raven flew back to the Great Wall with the horn, and you didn't even know about it. In the blink of an eye, the Dragon Queen found another scapegoat. This is fate's arrangement, Bran said in a deep voice. Danny looked deeply at the crow, and the last bit of respect she had for the omniscient three-eyed crow dissipated from her subconscious mind. What do you think of Pereston's suggestion to abandon the Northern Territory? She asked calmly. Abandoning the Northern Territory is the best choice. Without the Great Wall, the Northern Territory will be defenseless, Bran said without hesitation, as if it was Lannister who lived in the Northern Territory and not Stark. Since this is the case, you should inform Jon Stark and ask the King of the Northern Territory to summon his subjects to move southward. I tried to persuade him, but he refused. Jon swore to live and die with Winterfell, Bran said in a complicated tone. Danny pouted and asked, the sanctuary has been destroyed. Where are you now? Are Leaf and the others still alive? The children of the forest are still alive. They are with me in Gorney's tunnel. From the sanctuary to the Great Wall, there are thousands of kilometers of underground caves. Do you plan to hide in the caves for the rest of your life? The Westeros are not friendly to shapeshifters. Only after experiencing the destruction of the strange ghosts will they understand the meaning of the three-eyed crow. At that time, I will naturally appear in front of them, Bran said honestly. What happened when the Green Prophet's seal shattered? The Green Prophet's seal is very strong, but also very weak, Bran said perfunctorily. Danny looked at him deeply and asked, you still have the will of Bran Stark? You did it on purpose, didn't you? How many Green Prophet seals have you fused and how many are left? That has nothing to do with you. Bran's tone became cold. He did it on purpose. When the Green Prophet's seal shattered, Danny only picked up 1% of the fragments. King of the Strange Ghosts only took 10%. Bran, Jon, and Arya worked together to expel them from the Alliance of Will of Stark. If they caught Bran and turned him into a ghoul, King of the Strange Ghosts could follow the thought channel of Bran the Ghoul and steal all the Green Prophet's seals. It was a pity that he didn't manage to kill Bran last time. The reason why he was able to steal the fragments of the Green Prophet's seal was thanks to Arya's mental connection. To put it bluntly, King of the Strange Ghosts was only indirectly stealing the fragments through Arya. He didn't really enter the Green Prophet's forest consciousness domain, because the Green Prophet's seal was stored there. Even if there was only 90% of the Green Prophet's seal left, it was enough to assimilate Bran into an emotionless AI, just like Blindon River text back then. But the reason why the Green Prophet's seal shattered was because Bran resisted being assimilated. Just like Bran said, the Green Prophet's seal was very powerful and could increase a person's willpower by countless times. But at the same time, it couldn't leave the Green Prophet and couldn't work on its own. Otherwise, why would the three-eyed crows exist in every generation? They could just let the Green Prophet's seal take care of everything. Actually, the fact that the Green Prophet's seal shattered into countless fragments was a good thing for Bran, who had his own consciousness. He could fuse the tiny fragments piece by piece and ensure that his willpower wouldn't be destroyed by the Green Prophet's seal. In other words, Dany's guess was right. Bran still had a large number of Green Prophet's fragments piled up in his warehouse that he hadn't used. Since you don't want to take responsibility, why don't you give it to me? For the sake of the world, no matter how tired or bitter it is, I'll gladly endure it. Dany said righteously, exuding a fearless and heroic aura. You're too greedy. You've already obtained Mother Goddess's kingdom, and you still want the Green Prophet's inheritance treasure. Bran was very angry. He flapped his wings and squawked angrily. I'm just brave. I'm 10,000 times better than you. Dany said righteously. One day, I'll fuse all the fragments together and reforge the Green Prophet's seal, Bran said as if he was making an oath. Give me 1% as payment for repairing the Great Wall, Dany suggested. Isn't repairing the Great Wall your responsibility as the successor of Mother Goddess? Bran said angrily. Fine. As the successor of Mother Goddess, I can't just take the benefits without taking responsibility. Similarly, as the successor of Weirwood's divine kingdom, I have the right to ask for believers of the divine kingdom. You want me, you want us believers of the old gods? Bran said in disbelief. No, I'm not interested in you human believers. I only want the children of the forest. Dead or alive, I want them all. Dany's lips curled into a smile as she revealed her true goal. They won't go with you, Bran said hesitantly. Call the crows over first. I'll ask them one by one and convince them one by one. Dany smiled. They're my companions. Bran almost couldn't suppress his anger. They're not your slaves. They have the freedom to pursue a better future. Helping the three-eyed crows protect the Westeros is their pursuit. Dany looked at him disdainfully and said, it's because the three-eyed crows neglected their duty and lost the Winter Horn. It's also because you weren't willing to sacrifice yourself that the Green Prophet's seal was shattered. You didn't even notice that the deviant Ghost King came to the Great Wall. Now, you still have the face to call yourself a protector of the Westeros? I think that giving me the Green Prophet's seal and disbanding the three-eyed crows is the greatest protection for the Seven Kingdoms, the world, and the human race. Chapter 756. The 500-kilometer Great Wall had 19 castles. The 998th Commander-in-Chief, Jon Snow, used 17 of them. After Arisa Thorne took over, he only made some adjustments to the manpower and resources of the 17 castles. He didn't make any major changes. The Great Wall started to collapse from East Sea Castle and extended 30 kilometers to the west. It was well preserved. When it reached the Shadow Tower in the west, there were only a few large cracks on the wall, and a lake-sized glacier fell from the front and back. If the alternate Ghost Army didn't sweep along the Great Wall, the Night Watchmen would have preserved at least 80% of their manpower. Even if the alternate Ghosts led the ghouls to clear the castles south of the Great Wall, thousands of Night Watchmen survived. They were either on duty at the Great Wall or were alerted by Dark Castle. Or they retreated to the Great Wall after seeing the large number of alternate ghosts. In short, when the Dragon Queen arrived at Dark Castle again, thousands of night watchers on the western side of the Great Wall were struggling to move towards Dark Castle. Yes, there was a lot of space on the Great Wall, and it could be used to transport resources. It could also be used to transport large armies. However, there was a thick layer of ice on the Great Wall. Now that the ice surface was cracking, the ice would break and people would fall. Hence, the night watchmen were moving slowly and hesitantly. If Her Majesty can repair the Great Wall, it's best to inform the night watchmen walking on the Great Wall. They might be crawling through the cracks on the ice surface. If the cracks close, they might accidentally kill many night watchmen, Peristan suggested. This wasn't a groundless worry. If the night watchmen were walking through the cracks and the ice surface suddenly closed, they would be buried. Hence, while the ravens were informing the night watchmen moving towards Dark Castle, Dany had a long period of free time. However, she didn't rest. Little Green finally found the night watchmen's ships in Seal Bay. There are survivors under the East Sea Worm Passage. Get the pterosaur to bring a group of people and dig them out, Dany said to Erlu. Even if we know that King Alternate Ghost will go to Winterfell, we can't give up the search. The Alternate Ghost army is scattered, and King Alternate Ghost's forces are the weakest. If we encounter him, we won't have to wait until the battle at Winterfell, Erlu said. Leave this mission to the others. You should rest up and prepare to challenge King Strange Ghost. Erlu hadn't rested much for the past 2 days. There were dark circles under his sunken eye sockets. His stork bones and square chin were particularly prominent under his thin skin. Who did you ask to search for deviant ghosts? A glint flashed across his tired blue eyes. Could it be a shapeshifter? King of the shapeshifters. King of savages. You don't know about the three-eyed crow? Dany asked curiously. Seeing that he was really confused, she reminded him, Green Prophet. I know the Green Prophet. They are the servants of the Frost God. You are working with the Frost God? Erlu gritted his teeth. Stannis, let me tell you a secret. Dany pulled a long face and said seriously, actually, you're not Theon's biological son. He picked you up from the garbage dump on the street. What? The topic changed too quickly. Erlu was stunned for a while before he reacted. Then he flew into a rage. Are you humiliating me? Dany shook her head. Do you believe me if I say so? Obviously, you don't. Without waiting for him to answer, she continued, what I say might not be true. Why do you believe everything Melisandre says? Erlu was stunned for a while. He frowned and said, what are you trying to say? I want to say that Melisandre is not an omnipotent god. She might not know everything. She is also not a virtuous great knight who would never lie. Erlu said coldly, you said before that I have to take her with me wherever I go. Sigh, you don't even know how to be an emperor. You only want to fight for the Iron Throne. Dany sighed and took a few steps closer to her cousin. She whispered, a king should be suspicious of everyone, especially witches of unknown origins. At the same time, a king should know how to control all the power he can use. Witches are not trustworthy, but her power is real. You have to order her around like a dog, like an old ox, and guard against her like an ungrateful wretch. Are you trying to drive a wedge between me and her? Erlu's eyes flashed. He sneered as if he had understood something. I understand. You are afraid of her power. I'm demonstrating to you how a true emperor deals with an enemy. Didn't I just say that? A king should know how to control all the power he can use. I'm using you to deal with her. Dany also smiled. Her smile was very arrogant. You think I will be controlled by you? Erlu looked as if he had been greatly insulted. His face was livid. You are a fool if you don't listen. I am happy that you are a fool. I am happy that you are wise enough to listen to my advice. I am happy that Melisandre is unlucky. So, do you understand the difference between you and me? In your dreams. Erlu snorted and was about to leave. Do you know the true meaning of Yasha's prophecy? Danny asked slowly. Erlu stopped but did not look back. Don't try to lie to me. Melisandre told me that Jon Stark was only the child of the false prophecy in the illusion. Do you know the secret of Jon Stark's resurrection? Danny lowered her voice and told him everything about Jon being the vessel of Lalo's reincarnation. You are lying to me. Erlu's face was pale, and his voice was trembling. Why do you think that the King of Light would be selfless and help a mortal become the savior of the world? Or rather, would you help a pig become the king of the seven kingdoms? None of the deities were good. In their eyes, mortals are like pigs and dogs that can be toyed with, slaughtered, and sacrificed at will. Danny sighed. Erlu was in a trance for a moment. I don't believe it. He gritted his teeth. You can choose not to believe it, but you must remember to be alert. I was once Lalo's target. So, I really hope that you can escape the tragic fate that he designed. For heaven's sake, Danny had spoken the honest truth at last. East sea gazing. The sky was dark, the snow was gray, the north wind was howling, and the turbid waves were rolling. There were no birds in the mountains, no traces of people, and no traces of living creatures. Hiss! A loud dragon roar sounded from the western sky. Blackie, who was wearing a silver bellyband armor, flapped its wings and blew up a large amount of snow on the ground. It landed on a glacier that was 3 stories high in the ruins. Hiss, hiss, then, another 10 pterosaurs landed on a piece of plain snow in front of Blackie. Woo woo woo, the low, hurried sound of the horn passed through the thick soil and snow and entered the ears of the crowd. In the wild waves and raging winds, the sound could not be heard clearly. It was like an illusion. Ulma hurriedly jumped down from the back of Big Bear's pterosaur and ran to the place where the sound came from. He pushed aside the snow and pressed his ear against the cold stones. After listening for a moment, he said in surprise, "It's the horn. Someone really survived." Well, a day had passed. Big Bear, Garth, and the rest had also arrived. They also picked up Ulma on the ship 200 kilometers south of Donghai Wang Nan. Leaving Little Green and Little White in the sky as warning machines, Danny was not worried that there would be deviant ghosts surrounding them. So, her actions were very bold and unrestrained. She directly controlled a basketball-sized dragon flame fireball and burned the ice and snow on the ground with a sizzling sound. The original Donghai Wang Castle was completely covered by the collapsed Great Wall. The material of the Great Wall was 60% glacier and 40% rock. Besides Danny burning the ice and snow, someone had to dig the rocks and excavate the soil. Cora, Garth, the fat eunuch Beworth, and Quero surrounded Danny as guards. The 20 overnight watchmen transported by Erlu's pterosaurs started to get busy. Danny personally intervened because Donghai Wang stored 60% of the night watchman's supplies. This was a serious matter, so she had to come personally. She asked Jero Dane to transport the rations, furs, iron ingots, and the goods transported by the 7 dukes by sea. More than 80% of them were transported to Donghai Wang. Even John, after receiving a loan of 5 million gold royals from the Iron Treasury, bought the rations immediately. 70% of the rations were transported to Winterfell and 30% was donated to the Night Watchman. The rations borrowed from the Night Watchman were not included in the 30% donation. Although John had betrayed the oath of the Night Watchman, he had not forgotten his promise to the Night Watchman after he took over Winterfell and became the king of the Northern Region. He would use the power of the Northern Region to support the Great Wall. How many ghouls are there? Behind a tall glacier that blocked the biting cold north wind, Danny chatted with Ulma while controlling the dragon flame fireball to burn the hole. Recalling the scene at the Great Wall, the old ranger could not help but shiver. He said in a trembling voice, "They are endless and densely packed. It's like a sea of corpses. How many are there? Do you know how to estimate the number of troops on the battlefield?" Big Bear frowned. At least 1,000,000, Ulma said. 1,000,000. Garth Hyder said in disbelief, are there so many people beyond the Great Wall? The skeletons buried in the ground have crawled out. There are also wild beasts. Ulma's old eyes reflected the red light of the fireball with fear. Then it's more than 1,000,000. Danny said firmly. The northern region is finished. We can't defend it. Winterfell can't defend against 1,000,000 ghouls. Big Bear's face was pale. Danny's eyes flashed. She asked again, other than the corpses, what else did you see that day? I saw a tornado, a sun that suddenly lit up, and a large group of crows. The strangest thing was King Stannis Jester. He was singing a strange song, as if, there's treasure under the Great Wall. I know it. Everyone is coming to snatch it. I know it. Then he was stepping on the waves. He seemed to be able to control the waves. Are you talking about Patchface? Are you kidding me? He's just a jester. How can he control the waves? Richard, who was beside the hole, said in surprise. That's right. It's him. The aura on his body at that time. Ulma frowned. He seemed to be thinking about how to phrase it. Is it like this? Danny's divine power surged. Her purple eyes emitted a solid green light. Ulma shivered and nodded. Yes, it's like this. Just one look at him and he can make people feel fear and respect. A god who can control the waves. Shit, that jester is actually a Nami. Danny was dumbfounded. She had seen Patchface before. When Jon was revived, Shireen and Silas, Erlu's wife, had already been transferred to the Dark Castle's King's Tower. Patchface, whose face looked like a mosaic tile, was right next to Shireen. He was jumping and jumping around. He was a complete clown. She did not notice anything unusual about him. She did not expect, however, to act like a clown in front of mortals. Would Inami be able to put down her pride? Chapter 757. Patchface is Inami. The Red God Knight was puzzled. Your Majesty, you must be mistaken. Why would Inami be Stannis's jester? Cora asked with a strange expression. Yes, why would Inami be Stannis's jester? Danny was also puzzled. What was so special about Stannis? 20 years ago, the drowning god had found him. 5 years ago, before Robert had died, the Lord of Light, Lawler, had found him. Woo woo woo, suddenly, the sound of a horn came from a pit, followed by the cheers of the night watchers. The soil of the collapsed Great Wall had been dug through. Danny walked to the edge of the pit and looked down with the help of the red light of the fireball. It looked like a sweet potato cellar, with a thin opening at the top and a big belly at the bottom. However, the belly was not dug out by the night watchers. This was a tower at the edge of Eastwatch. The belly was the thick wall of the first floor of the tower, which was covered by a layer of glacier. Yes, the Great Wall had collapsed and covered the tower. The night watchers' worm tunnels were connected to every building in the castle. The sound of the horn was made by the night watchers of Eastwatch who had crawled out of the worm tunnel and bent over to blow the horn. Woo woo woo, why did it take so long? I thought no one would care about us. A yellow-haired young man covered in dirt crawled out of the hole and started to wail loudly. 300 to 400 people crawled out of the pit one after another. Everyone was laughing and talking loudly, their faces full of joy after surviving a disaster. Only this handsome young man was crying. Why are you crying? Didn't I tell you yesterday that I was going to call for help? Seeing the family emblem on his armor, Danny's eyes were filled with disdain. With such guts, you came to the Great Wall to be a night watcher. Your father should have arranged for you to be a royal knight in the Red Castle. This is a green fruit in the summer. Ursa sighed. This baby didn't put on the black clothes of his own accord. Ulma mocked loudly. As the instructor of the new recruits in Eastwatch, the old ranger knew everyone here. Wasn't Lord Ashuel a palace knight before? It was only because he committed adultery with Queen Margaret that he was sent to the Eastern Sea. I was wrongly accused. I am Queen Margaret's bodyguard, but I don't have any dishonorable relationship with her. Xiufu's face turned red as he loudly defended himself to the Dragon Queen. Later, in the trial of the church, even Margaret herself admitted the crime of adultery. What are you still quibbling about? And I don't care who you're having an affair with, as long as you don't cry loudly and annoy people. Danny said impatiently. I really. Xiulf was still unwilling to give up. He looked around and grabbed a tall man with black hair, an aquiline nose, and 3 scratches on his face. Onis, tell the Dragon Queen that I was framed by you and Queen Circe. This has nothing to do with me. The hook-nosed man angrily struggled to free his right arm. How is it not related? Queen Circe used sleeping with you as a bargaining chip to seduce Queen Margaret. You didn't succeed, so you lied to the Archbishop and said that you had an affair with the Queen. You even dragged me into it, the yellow-haired man said loudly. His words were too shocking. Not only was Danny's attention attracted, but the night watchers who were discussing the construction of the sentry tower also quieted down and looked over. I have already put on the black cloak. I don't want to have anything to do with the King's Landing anymore. The hook-nosed man blushed as he spoke to the Dragon Queen. You are Brother Kate Blake? Danny suddenly realized. The black-haired knight was a little embarrassed. He stepped forward and knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, I am Onis Kate Blake. I am willing to serve you. I don't need you to serve me. Guard the Great Wall well and kill a few more ghouls. Danny's eyes flashed with disdain as she said lightly. Hee hee. The night watchers around them chuckled maliciously. Onis was even more embarrassed. He lowered his head and bowed hurriedly. He stood up and was about to leave quietly. Onis, make yourself clear. The yellow-haired man pulled the hook-nosed man again, walked past Mormont and Garth, and came 3 steps away from the Dragon Queen before the fat eunuch, Beworth, pushed him back with his big belly. The Queen doesn't like you. Don't come so close, the fat eunuch said bluntly. Onis looked at Beworth coldly, then turned to the yellow-haired man and growled, Don't make a fool of yourself. Who here cares if you really have an affair with Margaret? I care. The yellow-haired man glared. I can put on the black cloak, but I can't become a night watcher by insulting the reputation of the Clayton family. What's wrong with you? Onis was anxious, angry, and confused. What's wrong with you today? Previously, when they asked you how Queen Margaret felt, you were extremely proud and spoke with assurance. When Danny heard this, she was stunned for a moment, and then her face changed greatly. Be careful, there was another person whose complexion suddenly changed. Joseph Clafton's fair and handsome face grew a thin layer of barbed scales, and his eyes were green like 2 will-o'-the-wisps hanging over the broken tombstones of a barren grave. His purple-black lips made a bubbling sound like a pot of cooked porridge. Before the others could react from the shock, he suddenly rushed forward. His mouth was as wide as a plate, and the black liquid was like a shadow tentacle, shooting out extremely fast. It split in midair and rushed to Beworth and the Dragon Queen behind the fat eunuch. Piss off. Danny reacted before anything could happen. Her 5-layered dragon spirit and soul-destroying strike were like 2 divine swords, slashing straight into the monster's eyes that were emitting green light. At the same time, she lowered her body and pressed her right hand on the hilt of her sword. A circle of green wind quickly wrapped around her body. When the pungent liquid shadow was in front of her, she suddenly accelerated and rushed forward. With a swish, the sharp sword was unsheathed. At this time, Zayaf's soul was cut by the 2 divine sword-like attacks. He was covering his eyes and howling in pain. The dark red sword flashed. Danny dodged the liquid shadow and stabbed the big sword into Zayaf's mouth. With a swish, it came out from the back of his head. Ah, it hurts. Beworth wailed. He also reacted quickly, swinging his sword to cut the shadow tentacle that was attacking his face. The shadow was hit by the steel scimitar, and immediately exploded into countless splashes of liquid. But the fat eunuch didn't want to wear armor, so he only wore a steel vest. His chest and waist were protected by steel scales, but his arms and face were only wearing ordinary clothes. As such, facing the splashes of black liquid, he subconsciously raised his empty left arm to block in front of his face. The place where the liquid shadow landed seemed to have been splashed with concentrated sulfuric acid. His sweater was burned through, his skin was rotten, and a layer of boiling blisters appeared. A large amount of white gas was emitted, and a disgusting smell of rotten flesh was emitted. "Queen, be careful of the shadow." After being hit, Beworth still subconsciously reminded. "What the hell is this?" When Dragon Queen stabbed her sword into Zayaf's mouth, Onis and the others on the side finally reacted. After being stabbed in the mouth, Zayaf didn't die. Instead, he clenched his teeth and firmly locked onto Danny's sword that was close to the width of a palm. His two palms that had grown a thick layer of black hair and long dagger-like nails quickly scratched Dragon Queen's face and chest 7 to 8 times. Yep, Zayaf's speed was also very fast. In the short time it took for Dragon Queen to activate the magic sword rune in his mouth, he actually attacked 7 to 8 times consecutively. Sizzle, a string of dazzling sparks flashed on Danny's helmet and chest plate. The terrifying thing was that after the sparks, it was clear that there were more than 10 crisscrossing scratches on the smooth surface of the mirror-like armor. Although the scratches were very shallow, like an ordinary person scratching the surface of a wooden table, he had indeed used his bare hands to scratch through the steel tiles. It was so terrifying that even Danny was stunned for a moment. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. At this moment, Cora, Garth, and the others also reacted. They unsheathed their sharp swords and stabbed into Zayaf's body like lightning. Moreover, they all stabbed his vital points. Bear's long sword slashed his neck, and dirty blood splattered. Half of his neck was broken, but because of the laryngeal armor, his strength was used up, and his head didn't fall off. Garth's sword pierced through Zayaf's back and pressed against the plate armor in front of his chest. Zayaf's strength wasn't too great, and he was wearing a fake full-body armor with weak back defense. Kuei Luo's sword hit Zayaf's eye socket and went deep into his skull. It could be said that if Zayaf was a normal person, he would definitely die. However, he wasn't normal. "You're hurting me." Zayaf let out a terrifying roar. His teeth that were biting onto Dragon Queen's sword began to grow. They were about the length of a finger and as sharp as a dagger. It bit on the blade of the sword, producing an ear-piercing sound of friction. "There's more to it." Danny sneered. Magic surged, and the dark red sword burned with blood-red flames. Flames shot out from the holes in Zayaf's nostrils and the back of his head. At that moment, his mouth seemed to have become a steel furnace, filled with blood-red flames. His skull became transparent, as if countless cracks had opened, revealing blood-red light. He, a familiar taste. Unfortunately, the fake demon sword in your hand is far inferior to Yasuo and Yahai's. It's like a normal steel sword compared to a steel tile. Zayaf's green eyes were also ignited by the flames. A long string of flames flew out, and Kuei Luo's right hand, which was holding the sword, began to feel hot. However, Zayaf was very calm. His voice was full of energy, and his soul waves didn't weaken. Instead, they became stronger. The power that had been suppressed before seemed to be gradually awakening. "Who are you?" Hearing these words and seeing this scene, Danny could not help but be shocked. "Who am I?" Zayaf laughed maniacally at the sky. "Ha ha ha. I am the world, forget it. I'm not interested in knowing who you were before. After all, you'll just be a corpse in the near future." Danny held the sword in her right hand, and her left hand pointed to the sky. Rumble, blazing white, warrior, dragon flames shot out from Blackie's mouth. Then, they drew an arc above everyone's heads and poured down on Zayaf's head like a waterfall. Roar! Zayaf let out an ear-piercing howl that exceeded the limits of human hearing. His voice was like countless flying needles, piercing the souls of the people around him. I am the first deity born from the beginning of the world. Ha ha ha, your dragon flames are useless against me. Zayaf howled in pain as he laughed maniacally. At that moment, his flesh was melting and falling off in the dragon flames, burning fiercely like a piece of paper smeared with wax. However, as his flesh fell off, it was like the shackles on his body had been released. A huge monster drilled out from under Zayaf's human flesh. It had goat horns, the head of an ox, the body of a snake, the tail of a scorpion, the claws of a ferocious tiger, and eyes that burned with green flames. It was 3 meters tall, and its skin was covered in layers of circular dark red scales. He bathed in the dragon flames and laughed heartily like a northeastern hero taking a bath in a bathhouse. Chapter 758. Boom, ah, what kind of monster is this? How did Xiufu become like this? He's not Xiufu. He's a demon. The demon has taken over Xiufu's body. Holy Mother, even the dragon flames can't burn it. The monster's transformation shocked Danny. The surrounding night watchers and Red God Knights also felt their scalps tingle as they screamed in fear. Walala, the bull-headed serpent monster looked up at the sky and inhaled fiercely. The blazing white warrior dragon flames seemed to have met the smoke from a range hood. They left Danny's fire control and swirled into the monster's mouth. The monster's python body seemed to have been plugged into a power bank. Bright red light slowly filled its lower abdomen and then piled up. From its lower abdomen to its chest and then to its throat, it overflowed. In the end, every round scale on the monster's surface started to shine with golden light. The round scales were like small suns. In the center of the suns, there seemed to be flaming runes flickering. This ability to control fire, this resistance to dragon flames, and as mentioned before, it was born in the first flame. Danny was shocked. She suddenly guessed who the devil god was. Although its form was a bit strange, it was most likely the shadow devil Lalo of the true god Lalo. Lalo had indeed come to kill her. Boom, the monster suddenly lowered its head and opened its mouth. Like a megalosaurus spitting dragon flames, it shot out a bloody flame that was 20 meters long and as thick as a thigh. Immediately, a few night watchers were hit and melted in the flames, howling in pain. That's right. The monster took away Danny and Blackie's control over the dragon flames. It absorbed them into its stomach and turned them into fire magic. Then it spat them out in the form of devil flames to the people around it. As the devil flames sprayed out, the bright round scales slowly dimmed. Even though Big Bear, Garth, and Chui Luo saw the monster transform, they didn't forget their responsibilities. Plus, they were confident in their tile steel armor. When the black dragon flames were absorbed, they quickly stepped forward and stabbed with their swords. But other than creating sparks on the monster's scales, they didn't do any damage. Now that the monster was spitting devil flames, they were the first to bear the brunt. After burning a few night watchers to death, the monster changed its direction and spat at the white knights beside it. Boom! Amidst the horrified screams of the people around them, the black smoke that gave off the stench of rotting corpses and the flames that looked like blood plasma suddenly exploded just a few centimeters away from the monster's mouth. It was as if a firefighter had placed the muzzle of a fire extinguisher against a wall and sprayed foam everywhere. It was Dragon Queen who quickly stepped forward. Wearing a steel glove, a green tornado revolved around her left palm. Like a giant shield, she blocked the monster's mouth. At the same time, the magic sword in her right hand pierced forward at lightning speed, hitting the monster's throat where the magic fluctuation was the strongest, causing it to abruptly stop spitting fire. Ding! Unfortunately, even with the Dragon Queen's inhuman strength and speed, the sharp dark red blade only left a small spark on the round scales at the monster's Adam's apple. It was as if it had struck a steel plate. Danny's attack was fruitless. The monster grinned and clenched its black hairy hand into a fist as big as a rice cooker. It hit her head with lightning speed. Boom boom. Dani was like Tony, who was hit by Thanos during the battle on Titan Star. Her body leaned back uncontrollably, dragging a 10-meter-long ditch in the snow. Along the way, she killed 2 Night Watchers and only stopped when she crashed into a glacier. The monster ignored the attacks of Big Bear and the Night Watchers. It strode forward and waved its claws to cut the Night Watchers, who swung their swords at it, into pieces. Just as it was about to deliver a fatal blow to Dragon Queen, who was struggling to get up, a black shadow silently but swiftly darted out from behind. It stepped on its swaying tail and climbed up its back like a monkey on its shoulder. The monster's reaction was not slow. It immediately turned its head and opened its mouth, preparing to roar a sound wave that could attack the soul. Demon, die 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 die, level 5 Dragon Spirit plus Warrior Godhood plus Sword God's Divinity. Dani's face under the helmet was pale and blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth. However, she endured it and continuously delivered a soul-destroying blow. If the soul attack was visible to the naked eye, everyone would be able to see that her eyes were like superhuman laser eyes, shooting out countless black, red, gold, white, and green sword streams. Roar! The monster hugged its head and let out an earth-shattering howl. Airwaves spread from its body and rolled up a circle of whistling snow foam in the snow. The weak-willed Night Watchers knelt on the ground and hugged their heads as they howled. At this moment, the black shadow that had already leaped onto the monster's shoulder suddenly waved a silver lightning bolt. After the attack, the black shadow immediately jumped away from the monster's shoulder. Its thin body bounced back 4 to 5 meters in the strong wind. Ugh! The monster with the head of the bull god covered its left eye and cried out in pain. One of its pair of large green lantern-like eyes was extinguished. It was Dani C. The little assassin had been lurking. When the Dragon Queen was sent flying 10 meters away by a punch, she finally could not help but jump out. Dani also borrowed the vision of the Megalosaurus and saw everything. She understood that with the little assassin's assassination skills, facing the bull god alone would be suicide. So she endured the pain of her internal organs rupturing and used the level 5 dragon spirit to control the situation. The effect was not bad. The bull god's scales could even block Dani's counterfeit magic sword, but its eye was still pierced by Dani C's steel dagger. At this moment, the others also reacted from the shocking change and roared as they attacked the demon god. That's a demon, kill it. Ulma drew his bow and shot an arrow. The dragon crystal arrow flew more than 10 meters and exploded between the bull god's eyebrows. Kill, protect Her Majesty Dani C. For unsullied with short swords and huge shields rushed towards the bull god. Kill the demon. Hundreds of Night Watchers also roared. Under De Xiong's command, 20 Night Watchers cooperated with the 4 Unsullied and used 4 huge shields to block the bull god. Behind them, hundreds of fierce men used their strength to block the bull god while using their iron swords and dragon teeth daggers to greet the monster through the gaps. Kill, this is the servant of the frost god. Even Erlu's 7-winged dragon knights joined the battle under the lead of Acne Face Richard. Under the strange gaze of the bull god's right eye, the knights of Blazing Red Heart shouted in unison, "For the King of Light, glory belongs to Lalo." The bull god was very tall, but it was only 3 meters tall. The bull god was very strong, but there were 4 huge steel shields around it. Behind the steel shields, there were hundreds of fierce men. No matter how strong it was definitely not as strong as hundreds of fierce men. If it was only these people, the bull god could use magic. Other than the armored knights and the Unsullied, no one could block the magic of flames and shadows. But every time it started to condense magic, Dani would continuously use 7 or 8 soul extinguishing strikes. After using soul extinguishing strikes continuously, Dani's head also hurt as if it was being torn apart, but her efforts also paid off. The soul extinguishing strikes were not fatal to the bull god, but it interrupted its attempts to condense magic again and again. Whoosh! Danny used holy healing to slightly stop the injuries to her internal organs. Then she opened her flame wings and jumped up 30 to 40 meters. With her head down and feet up, she stabbed the bull god's head with her sword like a meteor. Ding! A string of sparks flew, but it did not work. She stepped on the night watcher's head and tried to attack the bull god's right eye and mouth. Unfortunately, it was alert. Its eyelids opened and closed, blocking every stab. Its teeth clenched, and it almost took her sword away. Its defense is so terrifying. Danny was shocked, and her face was full of disbelief. Even if this bull god was a true god of darkness, wasn't it too much? Whoa! Just as Danny was considering whether to let Blackie join the battle, the bull god seemed to have suffered a fatal blow. It suddenly let out a shrill howl that had never been heard before. Ha ha ha! The bull god's skin is thick. Let's attack its steel door. In the crowd, Acne Face Richard raised a blood-stained iron sword and laughed proudly. With a loud laugh, he stabbed the sword again. This time, the 1.2-meter-long blade only went into the sword guard. Richard was still laughing and stirring the hilt with all his might. Danny was dumbfounded. Whoa! The bull god was in extreme pain. It struggled madly and exploded with unprecedented strength. It actually pushed the shield back 2 to 3 meters. Under the violent impact, the two Unsullied and dozens of night watchers were seriously injured, and they spat out blood. Thus, after squeezing out a space for it to move, it used its tail to support itself on the ground and jumped up 4 to 5 meters. However, on the 2-meter-long scorpion tail, there were 2 red heart knights, and one of them was Acne Face Richard. Yes, the bull god had a snake's body, and a long scorpion tail. At a rough glance, it looked a little like the Nuwa clan in China's Xianxia novels. Previously, dozens of night watchers were holding down the scorpion tail tightly, not allowing it to struggle. Richard was a knight who pursued glory fervently. The demon's appearance and strength were terrifying, but his blood was boiling. Regardless of whether it was the servant of the frost god or not, he had finally defeated the dragon queen. If he could kill it, thus, when the night watchers were holding down the snake's tail, he kept swinging his sword and slashing at it, causing sparks to fly and the blade to curl. In his anger, he had a flash of inspiration. He bent down and touched the end of the tail with both hands. Finally, he touched a soft spot. Then, he was wild with joy and thrust the iron sword into it. Dirty blood splattered, corroding his armor into a putrid black smoke. However, he did not care. He only hugged the snake's tail tightly and used his sword to stab with all his might. He stabbed it until it was smashed to pieces. Big Black! The bull god leaped up. Danny immediately stabbed 2 soul-suppressing slashes into the minds of the 2 red heart knights on the scorpion tail. When they let go with a cry, they fell from the thick and long tail. Slash! A black thunderbolt flashed across the dark sky. Hiss boom! Big Black roared. Its tail was like lightning, hitting the demon that leaped into the air. The demon was like a missile that had lost its speed, crashing into the snow 20 meters away. It was too fast. Everyone only saw a black shadow flash, and a huge crater appeared in the snow. The snow and rocks that flew up were at least 10 meters high. The ground shook slightly. Danny's fire wings flapped gently. She leaped 20 meters and landed beside the crater. She raised her sword and was about to stab it down. Suddenly, Richard staggered to his feet. With a ferocious face, he roared at the Dragon Queen, "I killed the bull god. Don't steal my glory." After shouting, he raised his iron sword and rushed toward the crater beside Danny, with a roar. "Use my sword, the Iron Demon Sword, to break the evil." The Dragon Queen seemed to be intimidated by his aura, and she actually took the initiative to hand over her sword. The pockmarked Richard was stunned, and his mind became clearer. "Why? This is your glory," Danny said sincerely. "What a pity. If only Erlu were here, she would definitely give him all the glory." Richard was hesitating. The demon at the bottom of the crater also struggled to get up. It roared at the Red Heart Knight, "Idiot, you are blaspheming the gods." Danny immediately said, "Sir Richard Hope, this is a dark demon. Only the Iron Demon Sword can kill gods." Kill gods? What a great glory! If the news spread, it would be enough to make all the people who laughed at me in the past respect me like a god. Thinking of this, the pockmarked knight no longer hesitated. He took the sword and solemnly bowed to Danny. "Thank you, your majesty. You are a great knight king with honor. May honor be with you." Danny solemnly returned the salute. Under the lake, the Minotaur monster's blood, broken scales, and purple-black meat were burned together, turning into a waterfall-like black soul, as well as a large amount of divinity of gray shadow and fire. There was no divinity of light, so she couldn't be sure that he was the king of light. Danny saved the divinity of fire first, planning to eat it when her song of fire made some progress. The divinity of shadow and black soul were all poured into Big Black Sea of Consciousness. Big Black was perfected. He activated the clergy of the seven gods again. Danny was a little hesitant. In theory, she should choose Stranger without hesitation. Stranger was the god of death of the seven gods' believers. He should be able to control part of the god of death's authority. However, after the Minotaur monster's assassination today, Danny also found a problem. She had the Han's face-changing technique, and the evil god also had a special stealth method. She didn't notice Xiufu's abnormality before. The Holy Father represents justice. This justice will definitely give the Holy Father's divine power special ability. Maybe, it can sense evil. Danny was looking forward to it. However, she also knew that her expectations might not become reality. Glancing at the night watcher who was sorrowfully cleaning up his companion's body, Danny sighed. She hoped that Koer's black goat would be more powerful. She chose Stranger for Dahe. Chapter 760. Stranger Danny felt very awkward at this moment. The priesthood of the seven gods was similar to the god's summon in Xianxia. For example, the god's summon of earth that was conferred by the heavenly court could immediately turn a mortal into a land. At the same time, he could also obtain all the knowledge that a god of earth should have from the god's summon of earth. Even if he was an illiterate soldier in his previous life, he could master the extraordinary knowledge of maintaining the power of the earth and improving feng shui the moment he obtained the god's summon of earth. If it was in the world of gods like the Faerun continent where extraordinary power was standardized, the priesthood of the gods was almost equivalent to the heavenly court's summon of earth. But this world did not have a complete system of extraordinary power. To put it bluntly, everything was in the initial stage, but before the gods could start their own business, the company entered the stage of bankruptcy and liquidation. The world began to degenerate, and it was difficult to protect oneself, let alone start a business. Therefore, the priesthood of the seven gods was formed unconsciously by the power of faith of the believers under the tacit approval of the rules of the universe. It was a kind of summon of earth. The knowledge in the summon of earth was either given by heaven and earth, which was a natural summon, or the heavenly court's big shots instilled their own knowledge and skills into it, just like a master tape recording a CD, which was a heavenly court summon. Even large immortal cultivation sects were qualified to create summons. The priesthood of the seven gods did not have the corresponding knowledge given by the universe, nor did the big shots inject experience points into it. It was all accumulated by the believers over time. Simply put, the knowledge that the believers of the past knew was only known to the seven gods. Therefore, the warrior of the seven gods was the position with the richest knowledge among the seven priesthoods. Blacksmithing, forging, farming, hunting, and all the other labor-related skills, was second, followed by the Holy Mother, healing and medicine. Perhaps the old woman, who represented wisdom, could surpass the blacksmithing, but the Holy Father of Justice, the pure maiden, and the stranger of death were difficult for the believers to inject extraordinary knowledge. Especially the stranger. After Dani and the stranger of the great black dragon spirit, she only received the knowledge of silence and her sister how to deal with corpses. This, the dragon queen would definitely not be willing to be a corpse collector. Therefore, unlike the warrior priesthood that helped Dani become the god of swords, the stranger did not help her increase her knowledge. But this did not mean that the stranger priesthood was useless. In stark contrast to its lack of knowledge, Moku's divine power was wondrous and powerful. Your Majesty. De Xiong rubbed his eyes and opened them again. The dragon queen was right in front of him and had not disappeared. But when he blinked and looked again, under the dusky sky, the dragon queen's body seemed to have merged into that gray and white darkness. She disappeared. Or was there a layer of shadow blocking his view? The others also noticed this, but although White Knight and the four shield-bearers did not understand, they immediately stepped forward and protected Dragon Queen in the center. Your Majesty. Big Bear was surprised and couldn't help but take another step forward. This time, he, Garth and the others were sure that there was no shadow around the Dragon Queen, but her figure was indeed looming, as if she was wearing an unqualified invisibility cloak. Not only was her figure not completely invisible, but even the cloak itself showed traces. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Big Bear asked in a low voice. The Dragon Queen finally turned around and glanced at him. Ah! Big Bear's eyes met hers, but he lost his voice and couldn't help but take a step back. What a terrifying pair of eyes. They were still the color of violet, but it seemed to reflect a world of death. Countless ghosts let out soul-stealing wails and stretched out their thin and shriveled arms, as if they wanted to reach out from the purple eyes. They wanted to climb out of the world of death, and even more, they wanted to pull in the living people who were gazed at by the purple eyes. Big Bear felt cold all over. The soul in his body was like water in a pool that had been opened, pouring into a gray and cold world. I was praying just now, praying to the stranger. Dani returned to her valiant appearance of the tall and slender Night Queen, exuding a trustworthy and gentle aura. She turned around and looked at all the people who came over in surprise and said with a smile, "Today, many Night Watchers died in battle. Their belief in the 7 gods was very shallow, so they were not qualified to enter heaven. But as Night Watchers, they sacrificed their lives for the 7 kingdoms and deserved to be rewarded. So, I prayed to the stranger and led all the heroic spirits to Mountain Paradise to rest for a few years. When the long night ends and summer comes, they will be reincarnated into the beautiful new world that they fought and sacrificed their lives to create." Your Majesty, what you said is a little complicated. I don't really understand, Ulma said in confusion. Not only did the old ranger not understand, but everyone around him was also confused. Tell me, where do people's souls go after they die? Dani asked instead of answering. To the 7 levels of hell. Ulma mumbled. Bad people go to hell, and good people go to heaven, a Night Watcher knight said loudly. We believe in the Red God. After we die, we will go to a world full of sunshine, gardens, wine, and sex, Richard said excitedly. Dani looked at him strangely, nodded, and said, in general, after people with faith die, they will be rewarded by the gods according to their faith and their lifetime achievements. In other words, they will go to heaven, or they will be punished by the gods and go to hell. Then, what about people who are neither good nor bad? She asked again. Everyone was dumbfounded. The 7 Stars Bible seems to say that the stranger will bring them into reincarnation and return to the human world, Garth said hesitantly. In the original version of the 7 Stars Bible, there were only 2 choices, to go to heaven or to the 7 levels of hell. Only underage children would enter a new reincarnation outside of these 2 choices. The centaurs had such a tradition as well. The bodies of adults would be cremated and enter the night kingdom of the horse god. The children would be buried underground and enter reincarnation again. After that, Danny made limited changes to the teachings of the seven gods. What Garth said was the content of the new Bible. However, such changes were only known to cultivators and those who studied the new Seven Stars Bible. Most of the night watchers present did not even know how to read and had never gone to the Holy Church to pray in their lives. For example, Ulma, who had lived for more than 60 years and believed in the seven gods, had never read the complete Seven Gods Bible. So, Ulma pointed at the corpses of the night watchers lined up in a row, waiting to be cremated by the dragon flame, and asked in confusion, "Are they being taken away by the stranger? Are they going to reincarnate? What's the benefit of reincarnation? Is reincarnation not a benefit? Isn't it good to wait until the long night is over and summer comes again?" Danny was puzzled. She had just turned into a stranger and entered the world of death to put the souls of the night watchers who had just died into the space of faith. Well, except for the believers of the old gods and Inami in the northern region. They were nowhere to be found. Danny did not see them and did not look for them. On the contrary, because of the faint threads of faith, all the believers of the seven gods, including Oni's Kate Blake, appeared around her at the moment when the stranger entered the world of death. Even at this moment, the believers of the seven gods who had died in other places also came to Danny as if they were attracted by a black hole. For example, the night watchers who had died under the collapse of the Great Wall 2 days ago. However, Danny did not care about others and only collected the souls of the night watchers. The world of death was attached to the real world and was equivalent to the shadow of the real world. The scenery was exactly the same as the real world, but it was a gray and cold world. The souls of the dead wandered around. There was no death god or ox head or horseface to manage them. There was no need for management. Those souls were emitting spiritual essence into the world of death every minute and every second. When the spiritual essence was exhausted and the life imprint no longer existed, they would vanish into thin air and completely return to the world. The world of death was similar to a spatial crevice. Activating the stranger's godly power would allow her to fuse into it. Hence, Danny's figure was faintly discernible, like a gray mosaic shadow. "What does reincarnating into another person have to do with me?" Ulma mumbled. "Ah." Danny was stunned. It seemed that this was not wrong. Unless there was a chance to awaken innate wisdom, after reincarnating, she would be considered as another unrelated person. At least it's better than going to the 7 levels of hell. The East Sea Kingdom was 30 kilometers away from the Great Wall that had yet to collapse. The Night Watchers could not mobilize their army and transport all the resources in the castle's wormhole to Dark Castle. If they really did that, the other ghost army would come back and even the Dragon Queen would not be able to save them. Hence, they built a simple 3-story sentry tower at the only exit of the wormhole. Their main purpose was to observe the movements of the other ghosts. Only a team of 30 people was left in the entire wormhole. If they encountered the other ghosts, they did not need to fight. They only needed to immediately retreat into the wormhole, close the door, and wait for reinforcements. This is the secret key to the communication center of the magic net. Danny handed a glass candle to the alchemist and instructed, "Every day, report to me regularly about the wind, temperature, weather, and the movements of the other ghosts in the East Sea Kingdom. If the other ghosts surround and attack the sentry tower, you can also send me a message." The Magic Net Center on Dragonstone Island had lost its suppression and regained its long-distance communication function. The alchemists who stayed behind at the East Sea Kingdom could contact the Dragon Queen at any time. Not only the East Sea Kingdom, but the 17 castles that originally belonged to the Great Wall also had alchemists. Back then, the reason why Danny built the Magic Net Center on Dragonstone Island was to obtain the ability to instantly communicate during the long night. Hence, she had long sent a group of alchemists with real skills to the Great Wall. They were from the King's Landing Alchemist Guild. Before the long night, the alchemists were responsible for preparing wildfire. When the long night officially arrived, Danny would activate the magic net communication. Unfortunately, when the long night came, the Great Wall collapsed. Most of the alchemists died in the tide of zombies, and the human resources were wasted. Back at Dark Castle, Dany once again lived in the king's tower. When Mance Rayder's wife, Dana, helped her tidy up the room, the Dragon Queen took the time to separate a part of her consciousness into the faith space. "Who are you?" A black sun floated in front of Dany. The sun was tightly bound by white chains. The black sun struggled a few times, and the chains rattled, but there was no sign of breaking free. "I am the God King of the Darkness, the Master of Shadows, the shadow cast by the first flame between heaven and earth." The black sun's voice was like thunder, and the whole faith space trembled slightly. "Are you Lalo? Don't be so secretive." Dany was impatient with beating around the bush and asked directly. "I am not Lalo." "I am also he," the black sun said in a deep voice. "Okay, you are Lalo, the shadow devil." Dany waved her hand. "Why do you look like a bull head and a snake body?" "You should be asking why the bull and the snake look so similar to me." "I thought you were a flame or a shadow," Dany said strangely. "To survive in the material world, one must have a material form, and that is my form. The bull and the snake that were born later referred to my appearance." Chapter 761. Every living being in the world was created with reference to the form of the gods, including you humans. Black Sun said. "That's a novel way to put it," Dany nodded, then asked, "What's the principle of the spell you used to enter the Night Watcher's body?" "You want to learn?" Black Sun teased. "I'm just curious. But if you insist on teaching me, I'll have no choice but to listen to you." Black Sun seemed to be stunned. After a while, he said proudly, "That cowardly human fell into despair after the fall of the Great Wall. Desperate humans attract the attention of the dark gods. I filled his empty and dead heart, and his heart gave birth to the person I am now. I didn't wear his skin. I've always lived in his heart. You won't be able to learn this skill." Dany looked at him coldly. "So, you didn't come to the Eastern Sea to ambush me after Orlas's explosion?" "Sigh, I came a long time ago, but I mistakenly thought that you were in a state of reverse overclocking. That's why I acted so recklessly. I should have waited for a better opportunity. At least there shouldn't be so many Night Watchers present," Lalo said regretfully. "Why did you plan to deal with me?" Dany frowned. "Because of fate. Speak human. You were born with a mission. According to fate, you should have become the torch that dispels the long night. But now, you've betrayed your original glorious and great mission," Black Sun said angrily. "Torch?" Dany's eyes turned dangerous. "Tell me, can you give me a satisfactory explanation for this Xianhua? Why don't you sacrifice yourself to save this world?" "This is your destiny," Lalo said angrily. "Tell me the details. How should I sacrifice myself as the torch? Do you know how the sun came out last time?" Lalo didn't answer. "Mother Lone sang the Song of Water to summon the sun back to the world," Dany frowned and said. "Then, do you know who will summon the sun this time?" There was a hint of pride in Hiller's tone. "It can't be you, right?" Dany was shocked and said in disbelief, "You are the King of Light. After the sun is extinguished, you should have died immediately like the Lady of Light. Even if you can survive as a shadow devil, you won't have the power to summon the sun." "You know quite a lot," Lalo said in surprise. "That's right. The past kings of light were all spirits of the sun. They were born from the newborn sun, and their power and life came from the sun. They were responsible for carrying the sun to illuminate the earth, rising and setting in the morning, day and night. As long as the sun disappears, the King of Light will lose his divine power and the foundation of his existence. There is a high chance that he will fall into eternal slumber, just like the Lady of Light. But I'm not just the King of Light. Before I became the King of Light, I was the fire god at the beginning of the world. It was I who sang the song of fire and separated the final first flame from the earth's core, allowing the mother goddess of the lone river to extract it and forge it into the sun of this era. So, do you understand? The sun was born because of me, not because I was born from the sun. I won't fall into slumber because of its extinguishment, Lalo said proudly. So the King of Light was born from the sun. Danny was stunned. Then she asked in confusion, why are you the King of Light of this era? You had the Song of Fire, so there was no need for you to occupy the eternal Song of Light. The Song of Light can't be eternal. Can the Song of Fire and the other songs of law be eternal? Black Sun's mocking laughter had a trace of sadness and resentment. Danny was silent. Wasn't Lalo the best example of, the Song of Fire can't be eternal? After discovering that there was only a trace of the first flame left in the Earth's core, I had a premonition that the Song of Fire would undergo a huge change in the following era. So I wanted to rely on the Song of Light to protect myself. But I didn't expect that in just a few thousand years, the Song of Fire would change hands twice, Lalo lamented. No wonder you lost the Song of Fire. You lack the courage to break through the single-plank bridge. Danny sneered. What do you know? Lalo was furious. If it wasn't to raise the level of the Song of Fire, why would I waste my time and energy to help a group of shepherds create the Megalosaurus and help them develop the Earth Fire and Dragon civilization? You've embarked on the wrong path. Cultivation is the most personal thing. How can you let others do it for you? Danny mocked. If that's the case, hand over the thing that Weirwood gave you. You said that cultivation depends on oneself, Lalo said calmly. You've embarked on another wrong path. Of course, cultivation depends on oneself, but that doesn't mean that you should reject opportunities. I'm just saying that you should focus on cultivation. Don't force things like opportunities. That sounds nice. Am I not working hard? I've been working hard since the beginning of the world. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years have passed, but I still haven't improved. Lalo said angrily. Danny was stunned. She sighed. Your talent is really bad. Yes, my talent is bad. The Black Sun didn't hide anything. After hundreds of millions of years, I finally realized this. I know that I can't rely on myself, so I have to find another way. You humans have short lifespans and poor foundations, but your cultivation talent is really amazing. If there's a human Holy Spirit that can help me complete my talent, I'll definitely be able to change the tragic fate of the world. Dream on. Who would be willing to sacrifice themselves to help an evil god like you? Danny sneered. This is your fate. Lalo said loudly. It's my turn to summon the sun in this era, but the last of the first flame has been exhausted. If I fail, the entire world will fall into darkness, and you will all die in the end. Don't you have the resolve to not be afraid of sacrificing yourself to save the world? I only have the resolve to enjoy the world. Foolish actions like not being afraid of sacrifice will never have anything to do with me. Danny waved her hand. I really should let old Blockhead see what kind of person his successor is. Lalo said angrily. It was as if the Dragon Queen had taken advantage of him. Danny sneered. She didn't continue on this topic. The Door God told me that the first flame has been exhausted. The Door God? The Black Sun was confused. The old Blockhead you speak of, the Weirwood, the Wind God. Lalo was silent for a moment. Then he said in a deep voice, the first flame he spoke of should be the flame that gave birth to the world. The first flame I speak of is actually the secondary first flame, or the embers of the first flame. In the beginning, the sun was forged with the true first flame, which lasted for tens of millions of years. There was no winter back then. The entire world was in eternal summer. Flowers bloomed and never withered. When we began to forge the sun with the secondary first flame, winter came. The sun's lifespan was even shorter, from millions to hundreds of thousands. This era is only 8,000 years. Now that even the secondary first flame is gone, even if there is another era, it won't last long. Only I can change this. Give me your talent. I can sing the true song of fire and summon the song of fire of the first flame. This is the reason why fate allowed you to be born. Why can't I summon the first flame? Danny smiled faintly. You? Ha ha ha. The black sun laughed wildly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Is this funny? The smile on Danny's face disappeared. Her eyes became dangerous. You are just a prisoner. How dare you laugh at this king? Do you have a death wish? 2 problems. The black sun sneered. You have to solve 2 problems. First, sing the complete song of fire. Second, become a true god. Even your ancestor, the Valeglia's sheep egg, took more than 1,000 years to take the song of fire from me. How old are you? When you sing the song of fire, the entire world will be taken over by deviant ghosts and will forever be in the cold and dark winter. 1,000 years. Danny was not discouraged. Instead, her eyes flashed as she thought of someone else who had said something similar. You must come. This time, I really want to help you. At least, I can save you 1,000 years of cultivation time. Blinden River text. Did he see something back then? If she cultivated normally, Danny estimated that it would take 1,000 years before she could sing the song of fire. But she ate weirwood paste. It was very likely that Blinden River text knew something and wanted to help her. I have good talent. I am confident that I can sing the song of fire in 10 years, Danny said confidently. Impossible. The black sun refuted. No matter how good your talent is, it can't be that fast. Alright, I'll tell you the truth. I cheated. I ate weirwood paste. Danny did not plan to let the evil god in front of her go back. Naturally, she did not care if her secret was exposed. Weirwood paste? The black sun was slightly confused. It's a divine medicine that can develop a human's talent to the limit. It's a fruit born from the roots of the door god's body. I've never heard of such a divine medicine. The black sun's tone became uncertain. Think about the green prophet and the three-eyed crow. If they didn't eat weirwood paste, how could they have turned from ordinary people into the omnipotent green prophet in a short 1 or 2 years? The black sun was silent. After a long while, he sighed and said, We have always wondered why the green prophet grew so quickly. So, it's because of weirwood paste. You are really lucky. A descendant of Valeglia is favored by old wood. No, it has nothing to do with the door god. The previous three-eyed crow was a member of the Targaryen family. Even though he was a scoundrel his whole life, he took advantage of the last moment when his mind was clear and helped me get in through the back door. The black sun, the three-eyed crow helped you change your fate. Did he forget his duty of protecting the world? He asked in disbelief. At first, he did his best to protect the predetermined fate because according to the predetermined fate, he would be able to safely get through this long night. But I didn't want to. My fate is in my own hands, not the heavens. Danny had a foul mouth and said something inauspicious. Even if you can quickly chant the song of fire, you're not a true god, and you still can't summon the sun. Must I be a true god? Danny frowned. Of course. If I'm not a true god, how can I come into contact with the core of the world's law sea? Why do you think that I can't become a true god? It's not what I think, but the current world can't give birth to a true god. Just look at the sheep egg and you'll understand. He was able to snatch the song of fire from me, but he's been stuck at the threshold of a true god his whole life. The sheep egg has always wanted to devour me, but I can also devour him. If I devour him, I'll be able to break the shackles and become a true god, Danny said. This. Lalo hesitated. He was silent for a long while before he shook his head and sighed. If it was before, you might have had a 30% chance. But now, You can't. Why? Because the sheep egg is ruined. Chapter 762. Crippled. Danny asked doubtfully. Did you think that I caused the Orlos explosion just to take your life and that it didn't affect sheep egg at all? Black Sun smiled coldly. He was heavily injured, and then I took away a third of his strength. Now, he's incomplete. Even if you swallow him, you won't be able to break through to the true God realm. You stole my gift package. You're forcing me to kill you. Danny's eyes were filled with killing intent. Your gift package? Black Sun sneered. What do you think my goal is in raising sheep egg? You and he are both my big gift bags. Okay, you've successfully packaged yourself into a gift package that I can't refuse. Danny's eyes no longer showed any hesitation. Black Sun teased, do you think there's still room for reconciliation between us? Danny gave him a thumbs up and praised, you're still the one with high awareness. Then, she waved her hand, and the blacksmith's divine flames that could refine all things surged from all directions and enveloped Black Sunday. Black Sun boiled in the blacksmith's divine flames, melting like ice, but also like ice in the flames, a large amount of spirituality and divinity evaporated. He was howling in pain and cursing loudly. I curse you, Danny Alice, I curse you madly, curse the night watchers and those blasphemers. When you enter the world of death, I'll let you know what the ultimate horror is. Don't think that the demon god's curses were just empty words. Their words carried great power, enough to affect the fate of most people in the world. I am the ruler of death and shadows. Just you wait, death will descend upon you one day. This is an eternal fate, and I will Danny's expression was cold and unmoved. She only increased the intensity of her flames, causing them to boil. In order to frighten others, she even pulled over the other demon god suppressed in the pond of faith. Yes, Sheepegg only had 2/5 of his soul left. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect retribution to come so quickly. Lalo, how does it feel? Ha ha ha. Sheepegg wasn't scared, instead becoming excited, laughing happily. Tell me Lalo's secret, and his retribution will be even worse, Danny said to the sheepegg. Ha ha ha. Young Dan crazily laughed, do you think my hatred for you is less than this bastard? I'm happy to see him in trouble. I'm happy to see you in trouble. I'm happy to see you in trouble. I'm happy to see the two of you fighting each other and both of you falling. Danny nodded and sighed. I have to say that your words make sense. Burning you makes me happy, burning evil god Lalo makes me even happier. Now, boom. A red, crystal-like blacksmith's divine flame landed on Sheepegg's soul. The sheepegg howled in pain. A large amount of spiritual essence and divinity evaporated, but they only passed through Danny's wind divine soul once before returning to the sheepegg's divine soul. There was no damage to the sheep's eggs, only endless pain. Of course, the spiritual essence that returned after the evaporation was imprinted with Danny's will. However, Danny's whispers seemed to have no effect on him. After the spiritual essence returned to the sheepegg's divine soul, the imprint she left in the spiritual essence slowly disappeared. Sheepegg even sensed it and mocked loudly, you want to control my soul? Ha ha ha, dream on. It's alright, at least you can persevere forever without dying. It's worth it to only hear your wails. Just like now, as you said, I'm so happy to see you two evil gods in pain. She smiled and said to the sheepegg. I curse you, I'm going to curse you madly. The sheepegg started to imitate Lalo. Language is like the wind, and curses are also language. Only the weak will scream unwillingly, Danny mocked. The black sun evaporated spiritual essence and divinity richer than the bull monster's corpse. It was pure divinity of death and shadow. It was still all given to Blackie to absorb, but strangely, no new divine position was born this time. Instead, it gained a large amount of divinity of death. That's right, Blackie gained a large amount of divinity of death. Previously, Blackie didn't have a divine position of death. Even if it absorbed the divinity of death, it would be like how ordinary people absorbed glucose and amino acids in food. It would all be converted into the divinity of Megalosaurus that strengthened the divine soul and body. Now, it had an additional divine position of stranger, and stranger corresponded to death and mystery. To give an inappropriate example, men ate sheep's eggs to replenish their eggs. But without eggs, there was nothing to replenish. Now that Blackie had eggs, it could replenish its eggs by eating sheep's eggs. To put it bluntly, gods of the same divine position had the possibility of robbing each other's divinity. Yes, the three divine positions of blacksmith, holy mother, and warrior also had divinity. However, Danny had never encountered divinity of the same kind in other evil gods, so there had never been a case of robbing divinity before. This was the first time for Stranger. One could imagine that in the Song of Ice and Fire, a world filled with evil gods, the probability of encountering the divinity of death was very high. Although there was no new divine position, the sudden increase in divinity of death also brought Danny a huge surprise. There were two specific points. First, after taking on the divine position of Stranger, she had a stronger adaptation to the world of death. She could almost break away from the real world and hide 99% of her body in the world of death, leaving only a dark shadow in her original place. Yes, just like those dark demon gods. There was no way to be invisible, but it was high class, which was very in line with the identity of Stranger symbolizing death and the unknown. Perhaps there were other functions, but Danny hadn't developed them yet due to the short time. Second, the range of the domain of death that Stranger could control was wider. Perhaps, one day in the future, Danny could really help Blackie build a 7 levels of hell. Westeros talked about the 7 levels of hell almost every day, but there were no 7 levels of hell in the world. Just like how Danny teased Tyrion before, saying that he would meet his father in the 7 levels of hell, that was complete nonsense. The 7 gods were fake, so how could there be 7 levels of hell? If Danny wanted to build 7 levels of hell for Westeros, the model would probably be very similar to the Ghost City of Fengdu and the Hell of Mount Tai in Chinese mythology. The underworld was the Cave of Fengdu. The world of death was the shadow of the real world. To build 7 levels of hell in the world of death, one must first find a place in the real world that connected yin and yang. Minotaur Demon Killer. Sounds terrible too. Think about it, is there a mighty, domineering, and catchy title? As soon as Danny walked out of the king's tower, she heard the pockmarked knight loudly boasting about his great achievements in the courtyard. Not only were there knights of red heart beside him, but there were also hundreds of night watchers and barbarians who had nothing better to do. Even the red-nosed old doctor was among them. They widened their eyes and listened attentively. From time to time, they would exclaim in admiration, making the pockmarked knight even more proud. After the story of Richard bravely fighting the servant of the frost god was told for the nth time, the main character in the story began to think about giving himself a famous title. For example, his former companion, Gordifalin, became the Giant Killer because of the corpse-picking giants. Danny walked over and said with a smile, "Why don't we call him Demon Hunter?" "Ah, the Dragon Queen is here." Everyone was shocked and immediately turned to salute Danny. Danny waved her hand, indicating that everyone was at ease, and said to the Knight of Red Heart who had become a little reserved, "Let me give you the title of Demon Hunter as a reward for your contributions in the attack of the servant of the Frost God. How about it?" Chapter 763. Richard's expression changed. The Dragon Queen gave him the title herself. Think of the famous Roseless Iron Guard, Brenny. He was much stronger than Brenny. Because he had killed an evil god. An evil god was also a god. He killed a god. Now his achievement of killing a god was officially recognized by the Dragon Queen. The pockmarks on the pockmarked knight's face lit up with excitement, like little light bulbs. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he bowed solemnly, raised his head, and said, "Isn't Demon Hunter too ordinary? There's nothing special about it." Danny said seriously, "Although the name is ordinary, there's a deeper meaning in the ordinary. A fancy title only represents your past, that you killed a skin-painted demon. But your glorious life has just begun. In the future you will face other ghosts, other ghost kings, and countless demons in the dark. Your glory cannot be limited. Therefore, the simple and low-key title of Demon Hunter can better show your ability and great achievements." Indeed, Demon Hunter contains a wild domineering aura and low-key luxury. Professor Paristan nodded and praised. "Hearing you say that, it's really..." The pockmarked knight was overjoyed. Demon Hunter Richard?" "Good, from today onwards, I'll be called Demon Hunter." Clutton Sanj on the side cracked his mouth full of rotten brown teeth. His expression was fearful and expectant. "There will be countless dark demons in the future?" "Countless does not mean that there are countless demons, but I don't know how many there are. There may be many, or there may be only a few," Danny said. "Are they as strong as the Minotaur that Richard killed?" Sir Clutton asked nervously. "Definitely not as strong as the Minotaur. As long as there's no fear in everyone's heart, we can definitely defeat them if we work together. Just like 8,000 years ago, Yeser and Ahai led the warriors to expel the demons from the Far East with the light emissary." Danny encouraged the Knights of Red Heart loudly. "For glory, for His Majesty Stannis, for the Light King." The Demon Hunter shouted excitedly. "Very good. You have fighting spirit and courage. Why worry about not achieving great things?" Danny praised him with a thumbs up. Then, she took out a stack of parchment the size of movie tickets and handed it to the Demon Hunter. "This is the temporary residence permit in heaven that I got from praying to the Holy Mother. Take it with you. Even if you unfortunately die in battle, you can still enter the heaven of the 7 gods. Come on, 7 of you have participated in that battle. Isn't it God's will?" Danny stuffed a movie ticket into the Demon Hunter's hand and gave one to each of the other 6 Red Heart Knights. A Red Heart Knight held the temporary residence permit in heaven in bewilderment and mumbled, "We believe in the Red God and are believers of the King of Light." "That's not contradictory. The 7 of you are the 7 sons. Now that you have the citizenship of Lalo and the 7 gods, you can choose freely in the future. If you want to go to Lalo's kingdom, you can go to his kingdom. If you want to go to heaven, you can go to heaven. But..." The Demon Hunter with a pockmarked face was conflicted. "The Light King is the only God. Don't the believers of the 7 gods also preach that the 7 gods are the only God who can do everything? Those words are just to fool ignorant fools. Knights, you are so wise that you should be able to see through the tricks of the monks easily," Danny said casually. She said it so casually that the jaws of the people around her dropped. "Your Majesty, you are the Archbishop of the 7 gods." Dr. Paristan reminded her with a twisted face. "Yes, I swear on my identity as the Pope of the 7 gods that what I said is true." Danny nodded and said matter-of-factly. They led their troops up the Great Wall and moved to the east. However, they were blocked by a giant glacier crack. After that, Blackie flew around the Great Wall and told the migrating night watchers to stop moving and stay away from the crack. The 2,500 night watchers had been waiting in the snow for 2 days. 7 of our brothers have frozen to death in the past 2 days. Sir Savon said in despair. "There are too many of us. If we go down the Great Wall, we might attract deviant ghosts. More people will die then," Sir Mallister said with a frown. "The Great Wall is full of cracks. Even if it can be repaired, it will take at least tens of thousands of people and decades, right?" "No, the Queen will use magic to repair it, just like that day, 7 gods above." Before Sir Mallister could say anything, a flame lit up under their feet. This gave Danny an idea. Could she use the Great Wall as her training ground? After that, she returned to the place where she first met the door god, the Long Night Fortress. Once, the Long Night Fortress was ruled by the Night King, and the deviant Ghost Bride and the Night King ruled the Long Night Fortress for 13 years. Once, the most famous violation of guests' rights in Westeros occurred in the Long Night Fortress. Rat Chef was born in the Long Night Fortress kitchen. Once, the 79 guards escaped from the Long Night Fortress, but they were brought back and buried in ice. Once, a brave girl named Danny Flint learned from Hua Mulan, disguised as a man, and entered the Long Night Fortress as a night watchman. Later, her companions found out that she was a woman, and she was raped to death. Once, the legendary hero, Star-Eye Samian, saw two hellhounds fighting in the Long Night Fortress. Once, Mad Axe slaughtered his own night watchman. Once, Dragon Queen entered the Black Gate in the Long Night Fortress, and then burned the Rat Chef to death. The Great Wall was a strange place in Westeros, and the Long Night Fortress was the most strange place in the Great Wall. Countless legendary events happened here, and countless legendary monsters appeared here. Danny revisited the Long Night Fortress and accidentally found a strange place. The door god was gone, and the Black Gate had disappeared. However, there was a space behind the wall where the Black Gate was. She took a plastic bag and blew into it. The bag bulged, and then she tied it with a rope. If the world of the Song of Ice and Fire was the bag, the Great Wall was the bag's mouth, and the strange space inside the Long Night Fortress was the space fold at the bag's mouth. Once, the door god's kingdom was placed here. Now, Blackie opened the space door, and Danny entered it. She was surprised to find that she heard the world singing. At the beginning of the world, the Song of Law was open to all creatures. The door god heard the Song of Wind, and then he sang his own Song of Wind. After that, the world gradually became stingy, and the Song of Law was hidden. Even the holy spirits could hardly hear the song of the world. Anyway, Danny was learning meditation. Before she met the door god, she had never heard the Song of Law of the world. Now, she heard it. She seemed to have returned to the beginning of the world. God, this is no longer a holy place for cultivation. This place itself is a treasure. Danny named it Source of the World, and made up her mind to occupy this treasure land. She spent 2 days modifying the magic circle so that the magic circle in the Great Wall could perfectly match Goldie. Well, Dragon Queen was busy every day, and she couldn't stay here even if she wanted to. However, she could let Megalosaurus stay. Megalosaurus was the source of magic and the control center of the magic circle of the Great Wall. It could also use the treasure land of the Great Wall to cultivate. Blackie, Little Green, and Little White had to fight with the Dragon Queen. Little Red was too young and couldn't take on the responsibility. Thus, the 2.5-year-old Goldie was called over and stuffed into the Great Wall to act as a battery. I feel that Goldie will surpass the 3 of you and become the big brother, Danny said to the 3 big dragons with a strange smile. This wasn't a joke. From now on, whenever Danny cultivated, she would be with Goldie as a dragon spirit. Goldie might not be able to grasp the Song of Law that she mastered, but he would always be watching, listening, and experiencing it personally in the form of a dragon spirit. Wouldn't his experience increase by leaps and bounds? Also, staying in a place like the source of the world all year round, even a pig could become a spirit. No matter how stupid Megalosaurus was, it was still smarter than a pig, right? Caw, caw, caw. Very good. You actually left Megalosaurus in the Great Wall to maintain the magic circle. That's great. Dark Castle, the 9th floor of the King's Tower. At the window, a red-eyed crow flapped its wings excitedly. Even if the King of Strange Ghosts returns to the Great Wall with the Winter Horn, the Great Wall won't collapse. After the Great Wall's magic circle was activated, the temperature of Dark Castle didn't rise? Danny was puzzled. Of course it didn't rise. In the future, when the sun is completely extinguished, the temperature will drop even lower. The Great Wall can only slow down the temperature drop, but it can't increase the temperature. Only the new sun can bring summer to the world. The excitement in the crow's eyes disappeared and was replaced by a trace of helplessness. You haven't found the King of Strange Ghosts? Danny asked again. The King of Strange Ghosts took 1/10 of the Green Prophet's seal. I can't spy on its tracks through the trees, but I can guess its direction, the crow said in a heavy tone. Danny said calmly, I don't need you to guess. It's Winterfell, right? If it wants to take over the northern region, it won't let Winterfell go. Will you save Winterfell? Bran's voice was as light as a gust of wind. That depends on whether it's worth rescuing. I think it's worth it. Winterfell can be the bridgehead to stop the strange ghosts, Bran quickly said. Danny waved her hand and said, I don't care what you think. I want what I think. Dark Castle's affairs have come to an end. I'll go to Winterfell personally. Now, you should give me the reward for repairing the Great Wall. Bran looked deeply at her and spread his wings to fly into the dark sky. After a while, a group of crows flew over from the north. There were too many crows circling above Dark Castle like a dark cloud. The already dim sky became even darker. The night watchers below were all alarmed, and they all pointed at the sky. Danny didn't care about what they thought. She sent a mental wave to the crows in the sky and said, I'm the chosen successor of your mother goddess. I can give you a new life. If you're tired of your current life, you can start a second life with me. If you don't want to leave the three-eyed crow, I won't force you. Just as she finished speaking, a ray of fire shot out from Dragon Queen's left eye. It was like a fluorescent gauze that flew 7 to 8 meters in the sky. Suddenly, it expanded and transformed into a cawing crow. When the crow flew into the sky, the other crows looked at it in surprise. Look at it. It looks like Carbon Tooth. It's Carbon Tooth. I remember that Carbon Tooth and Fruit left with the human queen. Carbon Tooth, where have you been these days? It feels like you've changed. The crows were chattering in a language that humans couldn't understand. Carbon Tooth. I'm not Carbon Tooth. Carbon Tooth sounds terrible. My name is Fog. You can call me Little Fog. The big crow cawed loudly. Palm. It exploded into a bright red sun. It was about the size of a plate. In the middle of the sun, there was a little girl's face. At this moment, the little girl's face was scrunched up. She looked left and right and pouted. This place is so cold. Don't you feel cold? Ayya, Carbon Tooth turned into a fireball. Carbon Tooth, is this your second life? It's so strange. Carbon Tooth, it's so cold. If you turn into a fireball, will it be extinguished? The big crows sensed that the little sun's form had changed, but its aura hadn't changed. They weren't afraid, and they all surrounded Little Fog and cawed. Ah, look! A sun appeared in the sky. Are you stupid? How can there be such a small sun? It must be Dragon Queen's fire magic. Don't you think that the sky is much brighter? It's like a small sun. It's too dark. If you hang an oil lamp on the Great Wall, the people below will think that it's like a sun. It's different. On the ground, the night watchers also started shouting. Palm. The little sun changed again. Under the instigation of the crows, Little Fog turned into a beautiful girl who flapped her dragonfly wings. This is my daily form. Little Fog pulled on her skirt made of flower petals and twirled around proudly. So ugly. Mother Goddess, Carbon Tooth has become so ugly. He looks like a human. What? Danny Rise wants to gather the songs of the 4 elements of earth, fire, wind, and water. Bran was too shocked and couldn't help but interrupt. Her ambition is too big. If she really gathers the songs of the 4 elements, won't she become the divine king? She's daydreaming. Long live Mother Goddess. Mother Goddess is omnipotent. Mother Goddess will definitely gather the songs of the 4 elements and become the world's first divine king. Little Fog turned back into a little spirit, raised her little fist and shouted fanatically. Danny facepalmed. She was just showing herself and pulling people into her group. Such a simple task, yet she managed to do it like this. Mother Goddess's secret has been exposed by you. Danny, rise, you're lucky to be able to sing the Song of Wind and Song of Fire at the same time. Even if it's 2 songs of the elements, you'll still feel the lack of time to cultivate, right? You can't master all the laws in the world. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Bran went straight to Danny and advised her. Cultivation is my own business. Why are you so agitated? Danny said in annoyance. Bran said in a low voice, this isn't just about you. Don't forget your mission. Don't let down Mother Goddess's trust in you. If you can't sing a complete song of the laws before the night ends, the world will be doomed. Unless you're willing to sacrifice yourself to help Lalo and let him summon the sun. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Danny waved her hand and said impatiently. What do you mean? You don't have time to waste. You don't have time to take the wrong path. Bran was a little angry. Since you're in such a hurry, why don't you help me with all your might? You said you want crows. I've brought all the crows here. As long as they're willing, they can all follow you. It's already like this. How do you want me to help you? Bran said angrily. Help me convince them. Don't push your luck. The crows are my companions, not slaves. You make it sound like I'm going to make them slaves. After a pause, Danny asked curiously, I thought you'd give the mission of summoning the sun to Jon Stark. I hope so. Unfortunately, he lacks too much opportunity compared to you. Bran's words were filled with resentment. Mother Goddess's inheritance should have been given to Jon. Mother Goddess, I've convinced 200 crows. After a short moment, Xiao Wu excitedly led a group of crows and landed on the balcony of the king's tower. She proudly reported the results to the Dragon Queen. The crows opened their red, gold, or green eyes and sized her up curiously. Only 200. Danny was dissatisfied. Bran didn't go back on his words. He brought all the crows here, and there were close to 4,000 of them. In the past, there were only 3,000 crows as animal companions. They were busy running around for the 3-eyed crow. The other 1,000 crows were too old, and their souls were too tired. They didn't do missions anymore, and they usually slept on the weirwood. Now, they were all here. However, Xiao Wu only managed to get 200 of her companions. Well, without Xiao Wu, there might be more crows who came to seek refuge with the Dragon Queen. When Danny thought of this, she looked at the little guy with a gaze filled with resentment. What's wrong? Mother Goddess, there are 200 of them. Xiao Wu had a blank expression. Forget it. I'll let someone else speak next time. Looking at the crows on the windowsill, Danny completely excluded Xiao Wu from the propaganda team. I'm going to Dragonstone Island. Do you want to come with me? Danny looked at Mance and his wife and asked. Mance's expression was serious. He shook his head and said, most of the free people on the Great Wall were recruited by me from beyond the Great Wall. How can I leave when they are fighting with their lives on the line? Do you think the battle in the south will be easier than in Dark Castle? Danny disagreed. Also, your son is still on Dragonstone Island. He's 2 years old now, right? No, he's 2 months and 7 days away from 2 years old, Dana quickly corrected. Do you miss him? Danny asked. The female savage's gentle and beautiful face was filled with deep longing. Of course, I miss him. I dream of him every day, but I can't leave his father. He can live a good life on Dragonstone Island. He's safe, and I can rest assured." As she spoke, Dana's eyes reddened, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Mance patted his wife's shoulder and said comfortingly, "If King Strange Ghost really crosses the neck and goes to the south, we'll go to Dragonstone Island." "What about you?" Dany turned her gaze to the silent savage Princess Whale. "Do you want to go to Winterfell? You haven't seen Jon for almost half a year, right?" Whale frowned and thought for a moment. She shook her head and said, "I don't want to be his vassal. Besides, he doesn't need me." Lastly, Heathfire, the Amber family's castle. Excluding the Night Watcher's castle, this was the northernmost castle in the Seven Kingdoms. The weather in the north was cold. Heathfire was not like Winterfell, built on top of a hot spring. Its architecture was more in line with the style of the Northerners. They built their houses underground. Not the entire house was built underground. Half of it was underground, and the other half was above ground. It could also be said that it was a stone building with a multi-story basement. In the summer, they lived above ground, and in the winter, they lived underground. Ordinary villagers would dig holes underground and build multi-story wooden houses at the bottom of the holes. The Amber family wouldn't do that. After all, they were earls with thousands of years of history. They were a prominent duke in the north. Their main castle was similar to the Taiha Palace in the Forbidden City. It wasn't the architecture, but the foundation. Both used earth as a platform, and on top of the platform, grand buildings were built. However, the Taiha Palace was built directly on the platform, while Heathfire's castle was built on top of the platform with multiple stories of basements. The buildings that were exposed above the platform were also very low. The edges of the V-shaped roof even reached the ground. The structure of Heathfire was also very simple. It was 100 meters wide and 200 meters long. It was a long strip facing north and south. The forest of heavenly trees was in the north and took up 40 meters. The castle on the platform was 50 meters long and wide. Around the main castle were towers, stables, and warehouses. The castle was surrounded by a stone wall that was 18 meters tall. The top of the wall was wide enough for 2 horses to walk side by side. Of course, just like Winterfell, outside Heathfire, there was a market for the commoners. Was the 18 meters tall city wall tall? Not to mention the great celestial empire, even in the southern Westeros, 18 meters was considered very tall. But it was different in the north. In the vast plains of the north, the snow in winter could be 10 meters thick. With the walls blocking the wind, snowflakes could accumulate to 15 meters and even overflow the walls. For example, in the original plot, why didn't Theon fall to his death when he jumped off the Winterfell walls with the fake Arya? That was because the Winterfell walls were 15 meters tall and the snow outside the walls was 12 meters thick. Jumping down was like landing on a cotton blanket. In previous years, even if the snow overflowed the walls, the people in the castle wouldn't be afraid of an enemy attack. To attack Heathfire, one had to cross thousands of kilometers of snow and ice. A large army couldn't cross, and a small army attacking the Earl's castle was equivalent to suicide. But this time, a large army came. They stepped lightly on the snow, and it was easier than walking. The walls were lost immediately. As Dany led the 3 dragons past Heathfire, she saw a scene similar to the one in the game from her past life. Corpses with glowing blue eyes crawled all over the squarish Heathfire citadel, and even the roofs. Chapter 766. Heathfire Main Castle, the staircase leading to the second level of the basement. The biting sounds of deviant ghosts, the battle cries of warriors, the clashing of weapons, and the desperate cries of humans came from the main hall above ground. Dear gods, we should listen to the Night Watchers and leave the north immediately. We should go to Winterfell, the valley, or even Bravos. Amber closed his eyes and said in despair. He did not even dare to turn his head because the basement of the second level was filled with children and women who were hugging their children's heads and crying softly. He was ashamed and did not dare to look at them. He was the second son of John the Elder. After his elder brother Junior John died in the Red Wedding and his father Elder John was rescued by King Aegon from Conch River City, the 14-year-old Ide became the official successor of Hethfire. He was supposed to be the guardian of Hethfire, protecting his subjects and family in the castle. When deviant ghosts were rampaging in the town outside the castle, he went up the castle walls and fought with the enemy. His swordsmanship was not high, but because he had the strong physique and tall stature of the Amber family, he slaughtered his way through the pile of corpses, waving his sword and sending limbs flying. But those severed limbs slowly but steadily crawled towards him. Severed hands grabbed his boots, heads opened their mouths to bite his cloak, and even dead people who were cut in half at the waist, even if they only had 2 long legs and half of their abdomen left, still had a pot of rancid intestines splashed on his face. At that time, he slid to the ground and did not dodge, but used his face to receive that pot of feces and intestines. That taste, he fainted immediately. Then he was dragged back to the main castle by the guards. When he regained consciousness, his 12-year-old sister Anna cried and told him, the town had fallen, the castle walls had fallen, the platform outside the main castle had fallen, the deviant ghosts had charged into the castle hall, and the next and final battle was on the basement level. There were no warriors on the basement level, only women, the elderly and children. The main hall has fallen, retreat to the next level and guard the staircase. Ah! Dire wolves, no, use fire, torches, quick, bastard, I'll kill you. Soon, B1 was also filled with suffocating black smoke, swaying red light, and thick cold fog. Dead people could not scream. Only the roars and howls of humans could be heard echoing in every room of the basement. My lord, we must make a decision as soon as possible. Hethfire's guard captain found Count Ide and said sorrowfully, I am willing to live and die with Hethfire. Ide gripped the hilt of his sword, his voice trembling. But those women and children, the head of the guards had lost his helmet. His grayish-brown hair, which was wet with blood, sweat, and ice water, stuck to his dark and rough scalp. There were a few bite marks on his square face, and half of his cheek was almost bitten off. Every time he spoke, air would pass through the teeth marks and form a string of tiny bubbles in the bloody wound. There were 3 deep scratches on his chest armor, which had almost pierced through the steel plate. These injuries were all caused by the dire wolf ghouls. If it were zombies, he would have joined the zombie army long ago. Luckily, the ghouls were magical, and not sci-fi. Ugh, alright, there are always losses. Zombies could headshot, so they had no need for weapons. Ghouls, on the other hand, were not afraid of headshots. Normal weapons could not deal damage to their vitals. Dying in the fire is better than becoming a monster. The head of the guard's words leaked out, revealing the despair and determination in his heart. The so-called final struggle began from B2, using kerosene to ignite the entire castle, and perished together with the ghouls and other ghouls that had entered the castle. It's all my fault, I shouldn't have hesitated. When I received the messenger crow from Dark Castle, I should have left Hethfire through the river. Ide hugged his head and said in pain. Leave through the ghouls' river, the river is already frozen. The head of the guard spat out a mouthful of blood and cursed. It's frozen. I remember that half a month ago, there were longboats transporting large amounts of food for us along the Mo River, Ed Amber said doubtfully. Amber was, after all, an old noble who had lived for thousands of years. He was used to the simple lifestyle of the Northerners, and he did not have a Linus daughter-in-law. He finally had some gold at home, which he used to buy food in Bravos. This was John's request, and he knew that the eternal night was real. Probably on the day the Great Wall collapsed, a thin layer of ice formed on the river. The head of the guard's face was ashen. He shook his head and sighed. The Northern Territory is finished, and the river is frozen. Are the White Blade River, Winterfell, the Wailing River, Terrorhold, and the Shattering River, Horwood Castle, exceptions. Stark, Bolton, and the rest are all finished. They have nowhere to run. Woo woo woo. The women who overheard their conversation no longer suppressed their emotions. They burst into tears, and in a short while, the whole castle was filled with their cries. Sigh, Sir Cruz, go make the arrangements. Amber's eyes dimmed, and he waved his hand dispiritedly. Boom! A loud explosion came from above, and the whole basement shook violently. Mud slid down the wooden planks on the ceiling. The violent and hot air rushed out from the stairway from basement 1 to basement 1. The army of the dead on the stairs were like pieces of paper in the wind, and they were blown into the hall. The people in the basement felt their ears ring for a moment. What's going on? I'd patted his ears and looked at the ceiling in shock. There was silence, and there was no second explosion. The head of the guards avoided the ghoul fire and walked out of the stairway to basement 2. He stuck his head out to look at the entrance to basement 1. When he saw the red flames floating in with the wind, he suddenly realized and shouted in joy, "Someone is here to save us, it's a kerosene bomb." So fast. Our messenger crow was just sent away less than an hour ago. Winterfell and Dark Castle couldn't have arrived so quickly. Amber was puzzled. No matter how puzzled they were, they accepted reality happily. After the explosion, more than half of the ghouls in basement 1 collapsed. The soldiers of Hethfire didn't know what was going on, but their morale was boosted. They charged forward bravely, and their swords burned the ghouls. 10 minutes later, they cleared all the ghouls in basement 1. Amber, under the protection of 3 shield bearers, carefully climbed out of basement 1. Just as he stuck his head out, Ide's body stiffened, and he was stunned. Did you see it clearly? What happened upstairs? Why did they only throw the kerosene bomb once? The head of the guards behind him asked anxiously. I saw it. Fire, there's fire everywhere. Amber said in a daze. There's no danger. The shield bearer said, and walked out of the stairway. Then, a group of soldiers followed the young earl out. The head of the guards understood what Amber meant. Yes, fire, there were bonfires everywhere. It was as if the entire castle was raining fire. High platforms, stairs, courtyards, walls, roofs, there were bonfires everywhere. They were densely packed, and the smell of burning corpses filled the air. They saw clearly that every bonfire was a burning corpse. The number of ghouls was as dense as the number of ghouls. The castle was silent, and only the crackling of the burning corpses could be heard. Black smoke and red flames filled the sky. In this cold winter night, they felt a heat they hadn't felt in summer. Only these few people left. Suddenly, a clear female voice came from the main hall of the castle. Who's there? Amber stood on his tiptoes, widened his eyes, and tried his best to look. But his vision was blocked by the red flames, and he couldn't see anything. Well, the main hall of the castle was filled with ghouls, and even the roof was stacked. Now, they all turned into burning matches. The roof was blown away, and the corpses in the hall were piled up like a mountain. The red flames rose 4 to 5 meters high, and the thick smoke covered the sky. Walala! The reed-like flames in front of them came to life. They moved to the sides like soldiers in formation, and made a 2-meter-wide path. At the end of the path, there was a tall throne carved from red iron ore. There were 3 steps, and including the back of the chair, it was 2 meters high. But everyone's eyes were attracted by the young woman in blue and white armor who was sitting lazily on the steps with her hand on her forehead. Her long sword was placed on the steps, and her mask was pulled up, revealing a face like the autumn moon. But her delicate facial features couldn't hide her valiant appearance, and her domineering temperament. Looking down on everything, it was all an illusion. Dragon Queen only felt a little bored, and she was worried about the situation in the north. Then, she sat on the steps and thought, while absorbing a large amount of Ghoul's spiritual essence. She didn't have any intention of shaking her body and releasing the aura of a king. The people of Fireplace Castle thought she was domineering, because in the blazing red flames in front of her, there was a ferocious black dragon with half-closed eyes lying on the ground. Put a dog on the back of a megalosaurus, and people would think it was the ruler of dogs. In an instant, everyone understood the identity of the female ruler. Dragon Queen. They were shocked and delighted. With the Dragon Queen's arrival, they were finally saved. But in less than 15 minutes, the Dragon Queen had wiped out the endless ghouls in Fireplace Castle. How did she do it? Even though the flames made a path, Amber and the castle guards couldn't walk over to thank the Dragon Queen. Because the flames burned around her and the megalosaurus, the bricks on the ground were boiling hot, and the iron swords and armor on the ground were even burning red. The dragon and the man didn't feel anything, and they were relaxed. But they couldn't stand it. Even standing in the side hall, far away, they were sweating profusely, and their cheeks were red. They almost fainted from the heat. Blackie stayed outside, and the Dragon Queen was invited into the basement hall. Under the light of the torch, Danny saw hundreds of sad and lost faces. These are the only ones left. Amber said bitterly, Fireplace Castle originally had more than 15,000 townsfolk. The town outside the castle fell immediately, and the castle walls couldn't stop the ghouls. Normal swords and knives couldn't kill the ghouls. In less than half an hour, only those of us hiding in the castle survived. More than 50 guards, more than 400 old, weak, women, and children. It was terrible. Tomorrow, a team of pterosaurs will come and send you to Winterfell or somewhere in the south. Danny sighed. This was the long night. Not everyone was as strong as her. Normal people didn't have the megalosaurus, and didn't have magic. Facing the tide of ghouls, they were like people who didn't know how to swim in a tsunami. They struggled and splashed, and then were swept away by the waves. Your Majesty, you seem to have killed all the ghouls. Is Fireplace Castle safe? Hearing that the Dragon Queen wanted to send the pterosaurs to take them away, Amber was in a dilemma. Killed all? Danny smiled bitterly and shook her head. Take a guess, how many ghouls attacked Fireplace Castle? Endless, at least 40,000 of them. The head of the guards, Sir Cruz, said confidently. Wrong. Danny held up 2 fingers. Only 2. 2. That's impossible. How can there only be 2 of them among the densely packed dead? Dragon Queen's words caused an uproar in the hall. Everyone looked at her strangely. Could it be that the domineering Dragon Queen couldn't do math? Chapter 767. You don't know how to differentiate between deviant ghosts and ghouls. Danny's tone was even stranger as she faced the strange gazes of the soldiers. The soldiers looked at each other, not understanding the situation. On the other hand, Captain Cruz and Amber were deep in thought. This is the first time we've seen a real undead. The previous message sounded as distant as Grandma's story. Cruz smiled bitterly. News of deviant ghosts appeared a few years ago, right? I've been promoting the United Front against deviant ghosts. Hethfire is the closest vassal to the Great Wall, yet we didn't prepare for it. Danny was bewildered. How could we prepare? We only know that dragon crystal weapons can deal with deviant ghosts, but dragon crystals are expensive, more expensive than white bread. We don't have the ability to store them in large quantities. Earl-eyed said dejectedly. That was the truth. Although Danny was happily digging for dragon crystals on Dragonstone Island, dragon crystal ores would only appear near volcanoes. How many volcanoes were there in this world? The world of the Song of Ice and Fire was larger than Earth, but the only places with active volcanoes were Dragonstone Island and Valeglia. Other places had volcanoes. For example, the children of the forest's dragon crystal weapons came from beyond the Great Wall. In the East-West trade, Asia's dragon crystals were one of the most important exports. This meant that Asia and beyond the Great Wall once had volcanoes. But after thousands of years, the Earth core fire dwindled, and the volcanoes were extinguished. Actually, even with the dragon crystal weapons, we can't defend the castle. A few years ago, during the War of the Four Kings, Heathfire's male population was almost depleted. "We don't have enough manpower," the captain said bitterly. That was the truth. During the first harvest feast after Robb led his army to the south, the two acting castellans of Heathfire requested Bran Stark. After Robb left, the 8-year-old Bran became the acting Winterfell castellan, to help them harvest their crops and defend against the barbarians from Seal Bay. Because the War of the Four Kings took too long, the Northern Territory's golden wheat was left to rot in the fields. More than 90% of the northern warriors that Robb took with him were farmers. "You said before, even if it's a small town outside the walls, there are 15,000 people in Hearthstone." Dany frowned. 1,000 conscripted soldiers and at least 3,000 family members left behind. Sir Cruz's face was so bitter that he could wring out a big bowl of bitter gourd juice. "We sent a total of 3,000 soldiers to follow King Robb to battle, but none of them came back. The rest are the old, the weak, women and children." Count Ith spoke in a hoarse voice, "Your Majesty, you may have misunderstood. It's not that there are 15,000 citizens around Heathfire. Instead, all the commoners in House Amber's territory have moved to Fireplace for the winter. There are only 15,000 of us." How big was the territory of the Onbo family? At least, it is bigger than South Korea. With such a large area, there were only 15,000 people left. P.S. You have to leave. Dany's tone became more determined after understanding the situation in Hearthstone. "As you said, there are 40,000 ghouls attacking Hearthstone, but that's only a small portion of the total number of ghouls. Perhaps, it's only 1%. If you don't leave, sooner or later, you'll be wiped out by the zombies that make a comeback." 1%? Everyone's expression changed drastically as they cried out in surprise. That can't be right. If 40,000 ghouls is only 1%, then the total number is no more than 4 million. 4 million, dear gods. Id Onbo's young face that was still covered in fine hair instantly turned as white as snow. Perhaps it was only 1 million at first, but... Dany looked around. "You're all used to burials, right? Even the corpses in the graves, they won't let them go. Do they still have any humanity left?" Captain Cruz's expression was grim. "Why do you think they have humanity?" Dany asked curiously. "Why would the gods allow such monsters to appear?" Sir Cruz muttered. "Now that they have appeared, we can only accept the reality and study their habits and weaknesses. The living dead that are resurrected from the dead are ghouls, and ghouls are resurrected from other ghosts, and are also controlled by them. Killing a different ghost, all the ghouls under its control will die, and become rotten corpses again." "Ah, I understand now." Id Onbo suddenly understood. His Majesty must have killed a different ghost, and then all the ghouls under its control in Fireplace Castle died. "I was wondering, there were hundreds of ghouls on the second floor, and half of them died after the explosion." Dany nodded and smiled. "Something like that. At that time, there was a different ghost standing on the platform in front of the castle, looking proud, as if savoring the fruits of victory. But it stood there alone, and it stood out so much that I couldn't help but throw a dragonflame fireball at it. But it was only one of the different ghosts that attacked Fireplace Castle, and there was another one outside the castle. Seeing that the situation was not good, it immediately disbanded the ghouls and hid in the snow forest. I was worried about falling into an ambush, so I only cleared the remaining ghouls in the castle and did not chase after it. You can imagine, when I leave, with just the other ghost that escaped, it will be difficult for you all to survive." Id Onbo expressed his gratitude to the Dragon Queen helplessly, and then agreed to leave his hometown according to her arrangements. Since they had decided to leave, the people of Fireplace Castle began to prepare their luggage. Food and valuables were sealed in the deepest part of the basement, and the pterosaurs could only carry a limited amount of weight, so they could not bring anything other than warm clothes. Idambwa and the guard captain were busy in the basement, while Dani climbed up the tower to face the cold wind and closed her eyes to cultivate. With the little golden dragon spirit, her consciousness returned to the strange space inside the Great Wall, and the laws of the world were open to her. Just like the holy spirits at the beginning of the world, she could directly listen to the Song of Laws. Before this, she had the 3 megalosaurus breathe fire along the wall, melting the snow that was more than 10 meters thick into water, which flowed into the river. This way, even if the other ghosts returned, the wall would be able to hold them off for a while. Just like that, half a day passed, and Dani, who was cultivating in silence, was awakened by the creaking of the gate. The group of old men at the castle gate crept over and tiptoed to watch. The old lame man glared at his old companions who were peeping. Then he turned to Dragon Queen and looked into her determined purple eyes. He said with a wry smile, "Such things happen in the northern region every winter. You can stop it this time, but can you change everything in the past? Can you stop everything in the future? I reckon that the old men in the other castles have started to take action. You can't change all of this. The past can't be changed. The future is uncertain. Perhaps the northern region will get rid of this bad habit in the future. But I'm only concerned about the present. As long as I can change the tragedy that's happening in front of me, that's enough," Dani said seriously. "Tragedy? It was you who stopped me that led to this tragedy. Thousands of years of history have proven this point. Either one lives, or the whole family dies. This isn't a bad habit. We northern region people have been able to reproduce for tens of thousands of years because of the old men's fearlessness in sacrifice." The old lame man's tone was full of pride, as if he was about to carry out a holy and glorious mission. Dani waved her hand and said firmly, "Come with me to Crab Claw Peninsula and Dragonstone Island. I'll take care of you. I've been helping the refugees in the Three River Basin and saved thousands of people. I don't need you old men." Chapter 768. To be honest, after hearing the Dragon Queen's words, Old Cripple was very touched. The legends were true. Every time a Targaryen was born, the gods would flip a coin to decide if he was great or mad. Old Cripple had experienced the era of the Mad King and knew how mad he was. Now that he saw the Mad King's daughter being so saintly, he was filled with emotions. "Your Majesty, I am very touched by your actions, but I do not agree." Old Cripple decided to let the Dragon Queen understand that being too saintly would only lead to an even more disadvantageous situation. "You must understand that the total amount of food is fixed. If I eat one more piece of bread, the children will have one less piece of bread in the future. Perhaps you have enough food now to feed all of us, but 3 years later, 5 years later. In the War of the Four Kings, it is not only the north that will be crippled. Hejien, the west, the royal territory, the Stormlands, and the Riverbend will not have any harvest. Last time, the long night lasted for a generation. This time, it will only last for 5 years. In the foreseeable future, the 7 kingdoms will experience a large-scale food shortage. Today, saving us useless old fogies who can't even lift a sword is just an illusory mercy. Before the long night ends, we will all starve to death. In the future, let the entire human race live on and survive the long night. That is the true mercy." Old Cripple was so sincere that he was almost touching himself. To think that I have such resolve. As expected, I should emulate those who are worthy. I did not have such noble thoughts before because I have not seen the great and benevolent king. Now, I have. Go back, go back. I have a way to solve the food shortage. Don't worry too much. Even an old dog can guard the door at night. You are not that old, there will be a suitable job for you. Who knows, you might even see the next summer. The Dragon Queen did not appreciate his kindness, nor did she understand his great resolve. She only waved her hand impatiently and chased him back to the city. Sigh, sigh, sigh. Your Majesty, don't shout. Don't call the children. That will not be a good sight. Old Cripple kept shouting. That night, the stable in the northwest corner of Heathfire was suddenly set ablaze. The fire started very suddenly and spread very quickly. Danny arranged the 3 dragons to take turns to hover above the castle, in case King Yi-Gui led his army to kill her. Therefore, when the fire broke out, Danny was the first to receive the news. However, when she arrived, she only saw that the stables were packed full of elderly people. There were men and women, more than 100 of them, and they were all elderly. In the afternoon, they were forcefully chased away by the Dragon Queen, but at night, they gathered together, splashed oil all over their bodies, and set themselves on fire. Don't save me, I can't save him either. Danny's face was livid. When she entered the burning stable and waved away the raging flames, the old cripple's eyes were about to melt, but he still sensed her arrival. Let us die with dignity. How shameful it is for an old man to eat bread made from the last of his children's wheat. If he died, at least he could make one last contribution to the children who were still alive. Alas, I was once young. For the past few decades, I would see old people going out to hunt every winter. There's not enough food, someone has to starve to death. If someone has to die, let us old people die. He was in a daze and spoke incoherently, but what he said was the same, don't worry about us, this is the best place for us to go. Danny stood in the middle of the half-burnt corpses. The flames raged, but they could not get close to her. However, the smell of burnt meat and the painful moans before death made her feel tormented. After a while, she closed her eyes and activated Requiem. All the old people who were crying in pain fainted. Then the fire, like a flood breaking through a dam, filled the entire shed in an instant. The next morning, Big Bear brought 40 pterosaurs and landed in the last fireplace castle. Big Bear, Garth, and Quillo rode the pterosaurs with her to the Great Wall, but when she repaired the wall, the 3 of them, pockmarked face Richard, and 7 other pterosaur knights left. Dark Castle could not afford the daily food of 10 pterosaurs. After all, pterosaurs were legendary creatures. Even ravens could survive in the northern snow, so there was no reason for them to freeze to death. However, there was a prerequisite. They had to be provided with a lot of fresh meat. When they were full, they would not be cold. However, the colder it was, the faster they would get hungry. Barristan was transporting the Unsullied and volunteers to Dragonstone Island. The 30 pterosaurs were the transport planes. Danny came to Fireplace Castle. After deciding to save people, she sent a message to Dragonstone Island and asked the pterosaur army to come and rescue this group of people first. Speaking of which, Barristan's volunteers were almost finished. The pterosaur army's task was not heavy. Your Majesty, this is the tradition of the people of the north. Since the fire in the stable last night, Dragon Queen did not return to Fireplace Castle. She only sat cross-legged on the city gate tower, in a daze. After Big Bear and the others heard the reason, they were worried that the Queen would be affected. Under the lead of Amber, they came to the city gate tower. After seeing the Dragon Queen, they were a little surprised. The tower had no walls. Other than the circular dome, there were holes in all 4 sides. The wind and snow poured in directly and covered the ground with snow. However, the Dragon Queen was clean. The area around her was also clean and dry. It was as if the wind and snow had a life of its own and deliberately avoided her. Your Majesty. Big Bear called out carefully. A tradition that deserves to be eaten by the other ghosts. Danny ended her cultivation state and opened her eyes. She turned to look at the few people who came over. The North needs to implement the most comprehensive reform. The current productivity and production methods are too primitive. It's almost no different from when our ancestors crossed the narrow sea to the west 10,000 years ago. Change it to a rural commune at Slave Bay? Big Bear nodded thoughtfully. After the long night ends, we can arrange for the nobles of the North to study at Slave Bay for a few years. I'm afraid that after the long night ends, there won't be many nobles left in the North. Garth Hyder's expression was serious. Fireplace Castle is not an exception. I suspect that Keho City, Deepwood Castle, and other castles near the north have all been attacked by the other ghosts. Do you want to go to Keho City to take a look? It's just next door at Seal Bay, Amber said worriedly. Let's leave here first. I'll go take a look. Danny stood up. Keho City in the House of Stark was only 500 to 600 kilometers away from Fireplace Castle. It would take the Megalosaurus about 3 to 4 hours to fly there and back. She did not go there herself. She only let Whitey take a detour in the southeast direction. Actually, Keho City could no longer be called Keho City in the House of Stark. The current owner of Keho City was the Thurn family. When she watched the TV series, Game of Power, Danny only felt that the male lead was a little know-nothing and a little silly. She did not think that he had any great political skills. She was wrong. In other words, the TV series, Game of Power, had played the role of an idiot. The real Awkward was not only sensitive to politics, but was also naturally proficient in political tactics. For example, he killed Slint in Dark Castle, Chapter 431, to avenge his father. For example, he cleaned up Robb's mess and completely solved the hidden danger of Starkard. Rickard Starkard, who was beheaded by Robb, had 3 sons and a daughter. The eldest son, Harrion, was captured by Lannister. The second son, Ide, and the third son, Torrin, died in battle for Robb. Only the daughter, Yali, was left at home. Rickard also had an uncle called Elf. Elf had 2 sons and 3 grandchildren. Elf secretly sided with Bolton, but purposely brought his second son and 3 grandchildren to Erlu as spies. Elf's eldest son, Cregan, planned to forcefully marry his niece, Yali, in order to become the Count of Keho City. Yali was unwilling, so she fled to the Great Wall to find Jon. Cregan thought that this was Starkard's family matter. He chased her all the way to the Great Wall and asked for her release. Elf arrested her and locked her in an ice cellar under the Great Wall, where she froze to death. From Yali, Jon also found out that Elf was a spy. He then informed Erlu. With Erlu's personality, how could he tolerate betrayal? The 5 Starkards received their lunchboxes together. Thus, the Stark House of Stark had no male heirs, and Yali was the only direct descendant left. After that, Elf did something that angered all the Northerners. He married Yali to Magna of Thane. The Thane people were the only tribe among the barbarians who knew how to smelt bronze, establish law, and the concept of a lord. Because of this, the Thane people were the strongest force among the barbarians. They had thousands of tribal soldiers. However, this force was not owned by Dragon Queen. On the contrary, the new leader of the Thane people was very hostile to her because she killed the Lord of the Thane people, CD. When Danny went to the Great Wall for the first time, she happened to see Dark Castle being besieged by the barbarians who had climbed over the Great Wall. Magna of Thane, CD, was the leader of the barbarians. CD raised his axe and rushed towards the Dragon Queen, but was slashed in half by Whitey's tail. After that, CD's brother, Snow, was killed by Erlu. CD's son, Saigon, became the new lord of the Thane people. After all, CD had killed his father. No matter how strong or merciful the Dragon Queen was, Saigon would definitely hold a grudge against her. Thus, he and the Thane people did not go to the Queen's corner to be Dragon Queen's barbarians. Jon and Erlu both took a fancy to the Thane people's strength. Jon married Yali Ka Stark to Saigon, and Erlu accepted Saigon's allegiance as the king. Thus, Saigon officially established the Thane family. Its emblem was a white sun surrounded by crimson flames. The Stark House of Stark's emblem was a white sun. Except for the color, the two were almost identical. The meaning was very clear: let Thane take Stark. With the help of Saigon's thousands of Thane warriors, Yali easily took back Karhold City. Nominally, Yali ruled Karhold City as the successor of her captured brother, Harion. In fact, her husband, Saigon, had become the true lord of Karhold City. John, the king of the north, and Erlu, the king of the Seven Kingdoms, recognized him. At this point, the blood feud between Stark and Stark had completely disappeared. In the War of Conquerors, Theon Bara, Aegon's illegitimate brother, married the daughter of the last Storm King, Lord of Storm's End Castle, Theon Bara. The Lord of Storm's End Castle was changed from Bara to Theon Bara. The Stark family was replaced by the Thane family almost yesterday. The House of Stark was no more. No matter how great the feud was, it was resolved. Also, because the Lord of Karhold City was replaced by the former barbarian, Saigon Thane, its ending was different from Hearth. The only thing that could stop them was the Great Wall. Now that it has fallen, the north is finished. Tens of thousands of ghouls are outside Karhold City. Duke Stark and King Stannis can't save us. They can't even save themselves. Saigon lamented. Saigon was a short, thin man. He wasn't handsome, and his hairline had receded prematurely. He looked a little old, but he had always been gentle to his wife. Yali hugged the baby in her arms and cried, "But he's my child. He's my son too, but we have no choice. The soldiers don't even have many dragon crystal weapons. In 2 hours, there will be no survivors left in Karhold City. No matter what, this poor child won't survive. If we hand him over, we can still protect thousands of our subjects." Saigon closed his eyes in pain. "Are you sure the dead will leave?" Yali loosened her arms. "I'm sure. It's no secret beyond the Great Wall." Saigon took the baby from his wife and choked out. Yali grabbed the baby and struggled, "Can't a commoner's child? It wants our child now. Our child has a noble bloodline." Woo-woo. Yali covered her face with her hands. "Why is this happening? Why?" Then, through Whitey's vision, Dany saw a peaceful Karhold City with smoke rising from its chimneys. The biggest enemy of the anti-Japanese United Front wasn't the Japanese soldiers, but the option of surrendering. Now, before the Anti-Ghost United Front was fully established, the biggest enemy had appeared. Chapter 769. When Dany arrived, she discovered that Winterfell had become a huge construction site. Half a kilometer away from the city walls, the snow on the ground had been removed, revealing black soil that hadn't seen the light of day for many years. Tens of thousands of soldiers surrounded the castle and dug a 4-meter wide and 3-meter deep moat on the black soil below the city walls. However, the moat didn't divert water from the White Blade River. Outside Winterfell, there was a market called Winterfell Town. The houses in the market had been dismantled. Wooden walls, wooden furniture, wooden roofs, and all flammable items were moved to the newly dug moat. The moat would be a river of fire that would block the ghouls. SSSSGA, Megalosaurus, Dragon Queen is here. Wah, 3 Megalosaurus, they're huge. Long live Megalosaurus, long live Dragon Queen. With Dragon Queen's help, we'll be able to defend Winterfell. Dany rode on her dragon and circled the Winterfell construction site at a low altitude, causing unimaginable wild cheers. Though she hadn't been to Winterfell before, many of the Winterfell residents had come from the Great Wall and the Wolfswood. They had seen Dragon Queen and Megalosaurus before, but they weren't so excited then. Well, they were excited to see Megalosaurus for the first time, but their excitement was purely due to curiosity and not anticipation for Dragon Queen and Megalosaurus. SSSSGA, when a small team of silver-armored Unsullied trotted out of the main castle and formed a semicircle in the courtyard, Dany let Big Black land. When Dragon Queen's winged dragon knights came from Dragonstone Island, they brought along a 40-member team of Tile Steel Knights. They weren't here to protect Winterfell. Their main purpose was to protect Dragon Queen in Winterfell. In Winterfell, Dany had to have guards who were absolutely loyal to her. It wasn't just Winterfell. In the future, she would bring a team of bodyguards with her whenever she went to any of the feudal vassals of the Seven Kingdoms. Jon led Mandalay, Mormont, Savon, Glover, and the other nobles of the northern region out of the main castle and into the courtyard to welcome the Dragon Queen. After exchanging greetings, they entered the main castle where the fireplace was burning. Dragon Queen and Jon sat side by side. However, the Dragon Queen sat in the middle, while the king of the northern region sat to her left. Below him were dozens of northern region nobles. Apart from the Grand Dukes, even the knights and knights had come. You've decided? Defend Winterfell? Dany frowned. The northern region is our home. It's my duty to protect my home. Wu said in a deep voice. Defend the northern territory, even if we have to die 1,000 times. That's right. We're from the north. Are we going to run away without even fighting a single battle? He didn't say that Winterfell was his home. He was supposed to defend Winterfell, but he said that he would defend the northern territory with his life. The northerners below were so excited that they began to howl. Did you know that the last fireplace castle has fallen? Dany asked. So fast. We just received a request for help from Fireplace Castle, Wu exclaimed. Dany sighed. Actually, it fell yesterday. Less than half an hour after the messenger crows left, the Enbois family castle was breached. The entire castle, including the town outside, had more than 15,000 people. Within an hour, only 50 guards and 400 old, weak, women, and children were left. Hiss. He sucked in a breath of cold air, and the face behind the furry beard instantly turned as white as snow. The excited northern region nobles in the hall seemed to have been splashed with a bucket of cold water. They stopped shouting and looked at each other in shock. The Enbois family was exterminated. Jon's voice was as light as a feather. Grand Jon wasn't here. He was one of the commanders of the Southern Expedition. A few months ago, he led 2,000 Northern Region cavalrymen to the valley with Erlu. If they hadn't met me. Unfortunately, I couldn't save everyone. Dany's expression was solemn. Sigh, fireplace fell too quickly. It's already a blessing from the gods that you were able to save the survivors. Jon didn't understand the regret in Dany's words. After a while, he said solemnly, Your Majesty, I hope you can provide us with a batch of dragon crystal weapons. You're quick to understand that Fireplace's rapid fall was largely due to the weapons. Dany gave Wu an odd look. After being the king of the northern region for half a year, he had gradually gained the calm temperament of a ruler. Do you know how many ghouls attacked Fireplace? How many deviants were there? About 2 deviants led 40,000 ghouls. The Watchmen of the Eastern Sea saw hundreds of deviants that day. Think about it, how many ghouls were there? There were more than 1 million ghouls. An army of millions? Lord Eel's eyes widened in disbelief. Oh gods, how is this possible? How can this be? How can we defeat them? That's not right. Are there more than 1 million people outside the Great Wall and in the northern region? The nobles of the northern region were shocked and doubtful. Jon said in a low voice, It shouldn't be less than 1 million. Deviants not only resurrect humans who have just died, but also the corpses of beasts and corpses in tombs. But don't be afraid. As long as we have suitable weapons, the ghouls are easier to deal with than the farmers. At least the farmers have sickles and hoes, or at least a wooden club. But 99% of the ghouls are empty-handed and don't have any armor. The dead that crawl out of the tombs don't even have nails or teeth. If an armored knight stands there and lets them attack, it'll... At this point, he laughed awkwardly. Maybe they'll all pounce on us and crush or suffocate us. Ha ha ha. A knight patted his heirloom armor and laughed heartily. The atmosphere in the hall was much more relaxed. How many soldiers do we have in Winterfell? Dany asked. After receiving news of the Great Wall's collapse, I immediately sent an order to the nobles of the northern region to assemble. Soldiers have been arriving in the past few days. Currently, there are about 13,000 of them. In a week's time, there will be close to 20,000. Probably less than a week. Dany sighed and agreed to help with the dragon crystal weapons. The Dragon Queen's army stationed at Dragonstone Island was immediately equipped with dragon crystal weapons. They even had backup weapons. Hence, the weapons they had in reserve could be given away. Anyway, she didn't lack money. If she didn't exchange the dragon crystal weapons for money, she could only give them away. At the very least, the Dragon Queen was a genuine deviant ghost. Giving him the weapons would be a good use. I hope you can kill 20,000 ghouls. Otherwise, you'll suffer a great loss. What do you mean? Count Phelant asked curiously. The Dragon Queen looked at him calmly. If we can't defend Winterfell, all of you will join the deviant ghost army. I won't. The short, bearded count's face reddened. Even if I die, I won't surrender to those monsters. Then you'll die in a very special way. Dany's mouth twitched. When we die, we'll become ghouls and be controlled by deviant ghosts. We'll become a part of their army, Jon said solemnly. Ah, so that's how it works. Won't the ghouls increase in number the more we kill? If we kill enough, we should be able to recoup our losses, She-Bear Alysanne muttered. Jon turned to Dany and asked worriedly, can you transport 20,000 dragon crystal weapons in a short time? Yes. Dany nodded. You were once the commander of the Night Watch. Have you forgotten the specifications of the weapons on Dragonstone Island? I almost forgot. We can first transport a batch of dragon teeth to make spears. At the very least, each person will have one spear. After that, we can use the extra teeth to make dragontooth daggers. Dragontooth daggers were obsidian serrated swords called marcavet. Sharp dragon crystal teeth were inserted on both sides of the wood pulp, making them look like saws. The dragon teeth inserted into the wood pulp could also be used to make spear tips or daggers. Currently, Dragonstone Island only made sharp dragon teeth. The Night Watch of the Great Wall cut wood to forge the wood pulp and spear shafts inlaid with dragon teeth. In this way, the cost of forging dragon crystal weapons on Dragonstone Island was reduced several times, but the efficiency was increased by dozens of times. A blacksmith apprentice who had just learned how to forge could forge hundreds of dragon teeth in a day. A dragon tooth weighed about 100 grams and weighed about 50 grams. 10,000 dragon teeth were only half a ton. A pterosaur could transport 30,000 to 40,000 dragon teeth. Of course, dragon teeth were consumables similar to bullets. Dragon crystals were hard and brittle. They could be easily broken by hacking or stabbing. For example, if the spear was careless and used too much force, it would accidentally stab the spine of a ghoul. The ghoul would certainly die, but the dragon tooth spear would also be broken. At that time, the spear would have to be replaced. When the battle was over, he would replace the broken spearhead with a new one. Compared to the spear, the dragon tooth dagger was more powerful and durable. After all, there were at least 20 dragon teeth inserted into it. Although the dragon tooth dagger was powerful, it had high requirements for the user. The user had to be a strong man. The dragon tooth dagger was big and heavy. It weighed at least 5 kilograms. How many times could a normal person wield it? Only young knights who trained regularly and had strong physiques were the best candidates to wield the dragon tooth dagger. Others might as well use the dragon tooth spear. After receiving the Dragon Queen's promise, the king of the northern region immediately ordered the construction of the moat to be stopped. All soldiers were to forge spear shafts and oars. John had seen too many dragon-toothed daggers, spears, and daggers at the Great Wall. He had also instructed the night watch to forge hundreds of thousands of spears and tens of thousands of oars. He was very familiar with this task. In just one afternoon, Winterfell had an additional 100,000 spears and 5,000 oars. Though they were crudely made, the quality of the wood was very good. They were definitely durable. That night, before attending the banquet, Dany went to the warehouse to see the spears and oars. She pondered for a while and said, "These aren't enough. I only have 20,000 soldiers." Roland frowned. In a real battle, you'll realize how quickly weapons are depleted. A soldier will be equipped with at least 20 spears and 3 dragon-toothed daggers. If you're a knight, you'll need 3 times more. Isn't that too exaggerated? Ghouls aren't humans. They don't feel fatigue and can attack continuously. It's not impossible for them to last for 10 days and 10 nights. Even 20 spears might not be enough. We have to work in 3 shifts and take turns to fight, Dany said with a serious expression. Are there so many dragon crystals on Dragonstone Island? I'll recruit a group of blacksmiths and miners to work overtime to ensure that we can mine at least 2 tons of dragon crystals a day. 2 tons, that's 40,000 dragon teeth. Jon said sincerely with a grateful expression. Thank you, Your Majesty Daenerys. Don't thank me. The more dragon crystal weapons you provide, the longer you can resist and the more ghouls you can kill. To be honest, I can't wait to continue transporting weapons for Winterfell. It's best if you can last for a week, a month. If you can last for a year, it'll be a blessing from the gods. Dany's expression and tone were very sincere. Looking at the sincere Dragon Queen, Roland's face contorted. Chapter 770. He was embarrassed and kept silent for a while before asking, "Do you think Winterfell will be lost?" "What do you think?" Dany threw the question back at him. "If the soldiers risked their lives, if you and your megalosaurus, if there were more unsullied in tile armor, if Dany raised her hand to interrupt him and sneered, "You should say, if Winterfell's walls were as tall as the Great Wall." Daydreaming. Embarrassed frowned. He realized that Dragon Queen was willing to support Winterfell, but she was unwilling to invest too much power in it. Yes, she was unwilling to risk her life for the center of the world, Winterfell. If we can kill the strange ghost king at Winterfell, won't the long night end? He tried to persuade her. That's a good idea. Stannis and I also plan to do so. Ordinary strange ghosts are enough to attack a castle like Hearthstone. But Winterfell. Dany's eyes flashed. Speaking of which, I haven't seen the true face of the strange ghost king. I hope to meet him at Winterfell and fight him. Fight him? You want to challenge the strange ghost king? Jon was overjoyed. If we kill the strange ghost king, even if the other strange ghosts don't die, they will flee back to the Great Wall. The crisis in the north will be resolved and the long night will end. Not me, I'm only supporting the savior. Dragon Queen's lips curled into a mocking smile. After all, the Asha prophecy stipulated 6,000 years ago that the strange ghost king can only be defeated by the child of the prophecy. I'm not the child of the prophecy. Me? I can't. Embarrassed's expression changed as he waved his hand. You're dreaming. Even your weapon, eh? Dany looked down at Jon's waist. She was about to say that he didn't even have a weapon to deal with the strange ghosts when she was surprised to see a familiar lady's sword hanging by his waist. Well, when Jon was a night watcher, Elder Sheong gave him his family's iron sword, which was also known as Long Claw. But after betraying the oath of the Night Watchers, Jon was too embarrassed to continue holding onto the Long Claw. Before leaving the Great Wall, he gave the sword to the 999th Commander-in-Chief of the Night Watchers, Elisa Thorne. Dany had seen Jon use a long claw in Dark Castle, so she thought that he only had a blank weapon, but she didn't expect. Dany pointed at the thin sword embedded with a blood-red gem and asked, "Where did you find this sword?" That sword wasn't thin either. Compared to Dany's slightly slender fingers, it was about 2 fingers wide. However, compared to Dragon Queen's 4 fingers wide, or even the size of her palm, it seemed very slender. "What's wrong?" Jon's gaze was evasive, but he still pulled out his sword. Clang! Under the illumination of the torches on the wall of the armory, the smoky black blade reflected a thin layer of light red cold light. The suspicion in Dany's eyes turned into certainty. "It really is this. Dark Sisters, who gave it to you?" "Dark Sisters?" Jon's hairy face revealed a surprised and doubtful expression. "Are you saying that this is the Targaryen sword used by Queen Visenya? Why is it with me?" The corners of Dany's mouth twitched a few times. She stared at Jon in front of her. Seeing that there was no trace of falsehood on his face, she also became suspicious. "The sword is hanging on your waist, and you're asking me where it came from?" No, you misunderstood. This sword is..." Jon was conflicted for a while before he said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, I won't hide it from you. My younger brother Bran has become this generation's three-eyed crow. You know about the three-eyed crow, right? He sent an eagle to deliver the sword." When he mentioned that Bran was the three-eyed crow, there was a hint of pride on Jon's face. It was like a child's grandmother telling the neighbors, "My Dazhuang got into Tsinghua University." "Why did Bran give you the Dark Sisters?" the Dragon Queen asked, even though she already knew the answer. Her face was filled with confusion and just the right amount of indignation. "I don't know. He only said that I needed it. Perhaps Bran wanted me to use it to deal with the deviant ghosts." Jon hesitated for a moment, but still unbuckled the sword belt. He reluctantly handed the sword to Dany. "I didn't know that it was the Targaryen sword. I'll return it to you now." Dany looked at the Dark Sisters in disdain. She did not take it. She shook her head and said, "It's too thin, too short, and too light. I'm not used to it. You can continue to use it. Return it to me when the long night is over." "Thank you. I really do need a tile steel sword." A relaxed smile appeared on Jon's face. Then, he said with a doubtful expression, "The savior you speak of is Stannis? If it was you, I think that Asha's prophecy might have some hope of coming true. But can he do it? He has the Light Emissary. Even if he has the red sword that killed the deviant Ghost King, he still has to have the chance to slash the neck of the current deviant Ghost King. I saw your battle under the Great Wall that day. The deviant ghost's speed and strength surpass mortals. I'm afraid. No matter what, Stannis is the #1 war god of the Seven Kingdoms. He has been fighting for decades. His martial arts should not be a problem. #1. War god of the Seven Kingdoms. Jon's face looked like he was constipated. From the beginning of the War of the Usurpers, to King Balon's rebellion, to the War of the Five Kings, and finally to the War of the Three Kings. Only one king managed to persevere from the beginning to the end. Not only is he alive and well now, he seems to have a chance of turning the tables. He might even become the savior of the world. Seeing Jon's disapproving face, she continued, "Think about your Stark. Your grandfather, father, brother and brother-in-law have all fallen. What right do you have to look down on Stannis?" Jon was speechless. Dany held her head high. She was as serious and solemn as when she announced Brittany as the Roseless Iron Guard. "I am willing to call him the #1 war god of the Seven Kingdoms." "If you like, do as you wish," Jon said. After a pause, he said worriedly, "What if the war god can't defeat the deviant Ghost King? What should we do?" "Don't worry. The war god still has a mage god by his side. Danny was still calm. Mage. God. What's that? John's face started to twist again. The god of magic, or mage god for short. Back then, on a certain website, the position of mage god was very popular on the fantasy channel. You mean Melisandre? As the #1 sorcerer in the world, doesn't she deserve the title of mage god? Danny asked. John nodded reluctantly and asked, is she willing? Asha's prophecy was preached by her, and the child of prophecy was also chosen by her. Now that the deviant ghost king is here, it's time for her to fulfill her prophecy. Danny said matter-of-factly. You can't just shoot your mouth off. Whatever you said back then, it's time to fill in the holes now. If Melisandre and Stannis challenge the deviant ghost king together, there might be a 30% chance. John waved his fist, excitement rising in his eyes. 30%? No, no, no. Danny shook her head. The Asha's prophecy was preached by the red-robed woman, but she wasn't the one who made the prophecy. Now, it's time for the #1 God King to make his appearance. #1 God King. John's face became awkward again. Lalo is the #1 God King. In today's world, which god is more active than Lalo? Which church is bigger than the Red God Temple? The god with the most followers was the Great King of Light. The night is long and dangerous, only the Light King can save the world. Anyway, as the Pope of the 7 gods, I'm willing to represent the 7 gods and call Lalo the strongest God King in the universe. Dragon Queen's eyes were clear, and her expression was serious, as if she was announcing an axiom that everyone knew. The #1 war god of the 7 kingdoms, the #1 mage god in the world, and the #1 God King in the universe behind them. This combination is terrifying. Lord Eel held a fat pork trotter, his expression shocked. After leaving the warehouse and returning to the dining hall of the main castle, the nobles had just sat down on both sides of the long wooden table when the King of the North announced the plan for the 3 gods' battle at Winterfell. The war god, mage god, and God King were known as the 3 sun gods. He glanced at the doubtful noble knights and said loudly, deviant ghosts are not scary. As early as 6,000 years ago, the Light King Lalo left behind the famous Asha prophecy, in the Far East. The fate of the deviant ghost king and the long night has already been decided. They will be ended by the reincarnation of Yasuo and Ahai. His Majesty Theon Stannis Bella is the child of the prophecy chosen by the Red God. He has the Red Hero's sword and the support of the world's #1 mage god and the #1 God King. He will definitely end the life of the deviant ghost king. Therefore, everyone must be confident in the upcoming battle at Winterfell. With the Dragon Queen, dragon crystal weapons, we can deal with the corpses. With the Dragon Queen and Megalosaurus here, the deviant ghosts will not be a problem. Then, the deviant ghost king will be handed over to His Majesty Stannis. He raised his horn cup and shouted, "Long live the war god, victory is in sight." Victory, victory. The Dragon Queen also raised her wine cup and shouted in agreement, "Long live the God King, long live the Mage God, long live the War God, the 3 sun gods will definitely defeat the deviant Ghost King." Seeing that the Dragon Queen also praised the prophecy savior, the position of the 3 sun gods suddenly became real and noble in everyone's hearts. Long live the God King, long live the Mage God, long live the War God of the 7 kingdoms. The nobles saw the hope of victory and were in high spirits. They raised their wine cups and shouted excitedly. After shouting for a while, the others were dizzy and fell into an inexplicable fanaticism. Only Madame Ballet, who had a widow's knot behind her head, had a clear look in her eyes and a thoughtful expression. After everyone had calmed down, she looked at the Dragon Queen and said, "Is Stannis willing? I heard that he has obtained an unlimited loan from the Iron Treasury and dozens of pterosaurs. He even took down the Blood Gate. Soon, the entire valley will be under his control. Is there a need for him to come to Winterfell and fight the deviant Ghost King?" As soon as she said this, the excited nobles woke up and looked at the Dragon Queen. Chapter 771. Ballet was a smart and pragmatic old widow. Well, at least smarter than Caitlin. In her opinion, Stannis was in a good situation now, and the best choice was to guard the Blood Gate, the only land passage into the valley, and subdue the rich and powerful vassals of the valley. Then, he could sit on the fishing platform and watch the world change. Even if he considered the big picture and thought that the other ghosts were a threat to all humans, he didn't need to let his competitor, Dragon Queen, watch from the sidelines while he challenged the king of the other ghosts alone. So, Ballet raised her doubts in front of everyone. Why is Stannis willing to be the first to take the risk? That's strange. Dany's expression was strange. Why is it strange? Ballet asked curiously. Actually, Dany could understand Ballet's doubts. Erlu appeared at the Great Wall first, carried the Night Watcher's wildfire bombs along the Great Wall to find the king of the other ghosts, actively tried to end the Long Night and even captured him, and actively sought her help to fight the king of the other ghosts. She was also puzzled by Erlu's behavior at the Great Wall. Like Ballet, Dany felt that Erlu shouldn't be so selfless and selfless, based on his desire for the Iron Throne and his actions that crossed the line. As for stealing the kill, taking down the king of the other ghosts first and fulfilling his promise with the Dragon Queen to end the Long Night as the king. If he really thought that, he was too stupid and reckless. No one had seen the king of the other ghosts before, and no one understood it. Know the enemy and know yourself, and you will never be defeated. He had been fighting for a lifetime, how could he not understand? But no matter what Erlu thought, Dany didn't care. As long as he took Aunt May, and preferably the King of Light, to defeat the king of the other ghosts, it would be fine. If he succeeded, she would save some energy and return home. The music would continue, the dance would continue, and the Westeros would be left to him. If he failed, the combination of War God, Mage God, and God King would be able to force the King of Strange Ghosts to reveal some of his trump cards. At the very least, if the Child of Prophecy couldn't complete the prophecy, the King of Light would suffer heavy losses, both in terms of reputation and strength. Therefore, she couldn't let him back out. She had to keep her promise. Well, Erlu was now playing the vanishing game. Dany was a little flustered. She had to encourage him to build momentum and public opinion. Slaver's Bay is thousands of kilometers away from the Westeros. Why didn't I just sit back and enjoy the scenery? Why did I ride my dragon here the moment the Great Wall collapsed? Dragon Queen asked. Babale was stunned. She was speechless. Alright, in her subconscious mind that she didn't even know about, a voice replied, the Westeros are the center of the world. Even if you became the first empress in the Ursos continent, you still had to rush back to win the support of the people of the Seven Kingdoms. She had this subconscious mind, but her rationality didn't allow her to really think that way. Therefore, she felt a little ashamed. The Long Night is not the Long Night of the Northerners, nor is it the Long Night of the Westeros. The entire world will be plunged into darkness. At such a time, any king who upholds justice and honor should step forward, abandon their previous filth, and unite to fight against the common enemy of mankind, the strange ghosts. Dragon Queen's words were stern and righteous. Everyone was filled with respect for her. Because she was the king who upholds justice and honor. Because, when she could have just sat back and enjoyed the scenery at Slaver's Bay, the first thing she did was to come to the front lines to fight against the strange ghosts. Ballet felt even more ashamed. I believe that no matter how many mistakes Stannis has made, this time, he will keep his promise and bravely take on the responsibility that belongs to him, the Child of Prophecy. I believe that he will use his actions to prove to me, and to everyone else, that he still has the desire to pursue justice and honor in his heart. At the same time, I ask everyone, I ask you to trust him. No, not only you, we want the entire Winterfell, the entire Northern Territory, and the entire Westeros to know of Stannis's great feat." At this point, Dragon Queen raised her right hand. "I swear, I will abide by the promise of, the one who ends the long night will be the king. As long as Stannis can kill the strange ghost king, I will immediately withdraw from the Westeros and honor him as the king of the Seven Kingdoms." At this moment, everyone seemed to see a holy light shining on Dragon Queen's face. Ballet, who had seen through the world, was also touched. "Long live the Queen, long live the War God, long live Queen Dany rise, long live King Stannis. Long live the War God, Archmage, Divine King." Before long, the entire Winterfell garrison knew that the Light King was about to fulfill his prophecy. Stannis, the child of prophecy, would join forces with Melisandre to challenge the strange ghost king at Winterfell. The War God, Archmage, and Divine King, the combination of the three gods was so powerful that even the Dragon Queen was impressed. They saw the hope of victory and they shouted loudly. The king of the Northern Territory even called for the scholars in front of all the dukes at the banquet and ordered the spread of messenger crows to let all the castles in the Northern Territory know of the impending decisive battle at Winterfell. He called on them to support Winterfell, the war god's decisive battle, and this battle that would determine the name of the humans. "Your Majesty, why don't you use your name to send a letter to the 7 dukes and King's Landing, calling on them to support Winterfell and help King Stannis complete the most sacred and great battle?" Jon was still unsatisfied and turned his gaze to the Dragon Queen. Regardless of the motives of the Dragon Queen and Stannis, the three gods' decisive battle at Winterfell was the most beneficial to Stark, Winterfell, and the precarious Northern Territory. The king of the Northern Territory had to do his best to facilitate this Winterfell heroes' assembly. "Let's use your name. My name will come second. After all, you are the Lord of Winterfell." "I can't steal the limelight," Dany said humbly. When the sumptuous banquet was about to end, Dany suddenly realized something: Sansa was not at the table. In such a banquet to welcome the queen, not to mention the daughter of the House of Stark, even Snow would get a seat at the end of the banquet. At the beginning of the plot of Game of Thrones, Robert brought Cersei from King's Landing to Winterfell. The king and queen, Stark and his wife sat at the head of the table. At the next table sat Robb, Bran, Sansa, Arya, Rickon and Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. At the end of the banquet near the entrance, Jon was able to sit at the same table as a singer like Mance Rayder. Well, Mance Rayder had climbed over the wall and disguised himself as a bard to attend the banquet. He even sat at the same table as Jon, but he was too preoccupied with self-pity to notice Jon. For tonight's banquet, the huge Winterfell main hall was filled with tables and chairs, filled with counts, knights, and knights. Even the squires were allowed in. Dany sat in Robert's seat, and I'd sat in his old seat. Even little Rickon sat with the counts. Sansa, however, did not show up for the entire banquet. "Where is Sansa?" Dany sat next to Id's seat and had a table to herself, so when she spoke in a low voice, the knights below could not hear her. "Sansa." Id paused, then stammered awkwardly, "She's not feeling well." "Not feeling well?" Dany was shocked. Did she abort her nephew's unborn child? "Aegon's child is about 5 months old, right?" she asked tentatively. Id's expression changed. He glanced cautiously at the Dragon Queen and asked in a low voice, "What do you mean?" "That's strange." "What can I mean?" Dany glared at him. "Is the child healthy?" "Your Majesty, that is only a child." Id put down his horn cup and said in a low voice, "I will not allow any harm to come to my sister and nephew." Dany pointed at her own nose. "Are you talking about me?" Seeing that the Dragon Queen did not look like she was going to eradicate them, Id heaved a sigh of relief and said cautiously, "I thought you wanted to. Don't you hate Aegon and Illyrio?" Now, Dany understood what Id meant. In the end, it was because of a lack of communication. After Aegon's identity was exposed, the Dragon Queen wanted to maintain the dignity of a victim. She acted coldly on Dragonstone Island and did not participate in the subsequent events. This made Erlu, Jon, Sansa, and even Aegon himself think that the Dragon Queen was very angry and even hated him. That was why Sansa did not contact Dragonstone Island after that. That was why Erlu had no qualms about burning Aegon. Only when the heavens descended did he realize that he had made a mistake. That was why when Dany came to Winterfell, the pregnant Sansa was terrified. She was afraid that the Dragon Queen would want her child to pay for her father's debt and avoided meeting her. That was why when Dany took the initiative to ask about his niece-in-law, Jon was extremely vigilant, causing the Dragon Queen to think that Sansa was ruthless and had aborted the child. Jon and Sansa misunderstood that the Dragon Queen's love for Aegon had turned into hatred. The Dragon Queen also misunderstood that Sansa had abandoned the fake crown prince because her eldest nephew had been burned to death. I will convene a meeting. In the meeting, Illyrio and Varys will receive a fair and open trial. As for Aegon, Dany sighed, her expression complicated. He is a good child and also an innocent and pitiful person. I was busy with the war in Meereen and didn't expect Stannis to be so ruthless. Sigh. We also didn't expect Stannis to burn him to death. Jon's expression softened as he shook his head with a bitter smile. We didn't give up on Aegon. No matter how his identity changed, one thing would never change. He is Sansa's husband. However, Sansa couldn't accept the change in his identity and flew to Moongate Castle to relax. She also planned to wait for him there. We thought that Stannis would quickly take over Moongate Castle. After that, there was an accident. Sansa and I were injured. We rested for 2 days and then. Injured? Jon looked down and lied. The backlash from a failed magic experiment. Dany glanced at him calmly. Jon smiled with relief. Luckily, Aegon was devoutly serving the 7 gods and was protected by the Holy Mother. He escaped the tragic fate of being sacrificed. He. Dany smiled meaningfully. Sansa, we thought too much. Dany Rise is indeed a benevolent queen. She will give Illyrio and Varys a fair trial, but declare Aegon innocent. You and the child are safe. She even allowed the child to use the surname Targaryen. After the banquet, he excitedly went to find his sister and told her the great news. Chapter 772. Sansa looked rather pitiful. Her face was pale and her eyes were dim. She had lost a lot of weight, but her stomach was bloated, making her body look even thinner. When Jon came in, she was sitting in front of the window, staring blankly at the brightly lit castle below. It was as if she was chasing after familiar people and things in her memory. After talking excitedly for a while, she didn't react for a moment. She turned around and asked blankly, "What did you say?" Seeing his sister's lifeless eyes, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. He squeezed out a soft smile and said softly, "Sansa, at the banquet, Dany Rise asked me about you and the child. She was very concerned and didn't mean any harm as we suspected." "Are you sure?" Sansa asked doubtfully. Jon nodded and sighed. "She's completely different from her father, the Mad King. She's a truly benevolent and magnanimous queen. When I first met her at the wall, I was worried that she would burn me to death because of the previous generation's blood feud. But she didn't. She's very fair. She believes that the feud between the parents shouldn't affect the younger generation. The guilty will also receive a fair trial. That's why I'm fine. Stannis doesn't need to suffer her revenge for his actions during the War of the Usurpers. After that, the Dragon Queen didn't do anything to you or Rickon. She even allowed Aegon and Stark to marry." Sansa hesitated. But Illyrio clearly used Dany Rhys and Viserys as shields to cover for Aegon. Sansa also understood Illyrio's sinister intentions toward the dragon siblings. It didn't take much intelligence. After Aegon's identity was revealed, everyone understood that Illyrio's ultimate goal was to help his son ascend the Iron Throne. Then, his efforts to help Dany Rhys and her brother restore their country were too conspicuous. Jon said thoughtfully, Dany Rhys planned to convene the council a long time ago. She once told me that regarding the feud between Targaryen and Stark, such as our grandfather and uncle being killed by the Mad King, she would give a fair verdict at the council. Even if our father overthrew the Targaryen dynasty, she would restore our grandfather's honor. She could even give a fair verdict for the murder of her father and the destruction of her country. I believe that she would only judge Illyrio personally. After all, Aegon was kept in the dark. Does that mean she forgave Aegon? Sansa's blue eyes glowed. Not only did she forgive me, she also announced that she still recognizes the other branch of Targaryen that Aegon founded, he said with a forced smile. Really? Sansa's eyes twinkled like stars. Jon nodded and said happily, at the Grand Council, Daenerys will also make the final judgment on the Blackfyre Rebellion. She will divide the Targaryens into different branches, just like what Aegon did that day. So, Aegon will still be Aegon Targaryen, a separate branch from Dany Rhys's Targaryen clan. Your child will still be a Targaryen, recognized by the Dragon Queen. You and your child will inherit Aegon's everything. Everything. Sansa's eyes sparkled. Everything, what does it include? Jon was stunned. What does Aegon have left? 2 pterosaurs and the gold and silver he plundered from River Rapture, and maybe Heron Castle. No, there's still Storm's End. Sansa gritted her teeth. Stannis lied to all of us. He said he wanted to return to Storm's End, but he attacked and took the valley. Since he took the valley, Storm's End still belongs to Aegon. But... Jon hesitated. Stannis only promised to give Heron Castle to your child. What's the point of that promise? Not only did Sansa regain her vitality, she even turned into a lioness. She roared, I fulfilled all my promises, but how did he treat Aegon? His embarrassed dog but face became embarrassed again. Stannis is at his peak now. I'm afraid you won't be able to take Storm's End, he said softly. Storm's End is in the hands of the Golden Corps. Although they've been crippled, they still have close to 6,000 members. Sansa also lowered her voice. Jon took a deep look at his sister and said in a deep voice, Stannis has a large army of winged dragons. The only reason he hasn't taken down Storm's End is because he hasn't put his attention back on Storm's End yet. Sansa's expression changed and she fell silent. After a while, she asked sullenly, I heard the whole castle shouting, Long live Stannis, the god of war, and, 3 gods' army. What's going on? Jon pulled his sister to sit on the couch by the fireplace and told her everything that happened today. Sansa's eyes brightened. In an instant, thousands of thoughts flashed through her mind. I understand. Protecting Winterfell is the most important thing now. She nodded. I'll meet Dany and Rhys tomorrow. I won't mention Storm's End again. Mountain Paradise, Holy Sparrow's floating continent. The situation where there was only one holy church in the vast grassland had changed. Sparrow's city was now divided into 3 rings. The holy church was in the center of the inner ring. Around the holy church was an exquisite 2-story marble building. It was a villa with a garden at the front and a swimming pool at the back. The second ring was about 5 kilometers away from the holy church. There were few buildings and no plans. The third ring was 15 kilometers away from the holy church. At the edge, there was a large construction site that could accommodate hundreds of people. Overall, the holy church had more than 1,000 people than when Aegon had first entered it, but it still seemed very empty. However, after the Dragon Queen had obtained 1% of the Green Prophet's seal, the requirement for believers to ascend to heaven had been lowered from 200 to 100. Recently, there were new believers knocking on the door of Mountain Paradise every few days. King Aegon, who was wearing a neat grey robe and had his hair combed back like the sparrows, once again welcomed a believer's heroic spirit from the foot of the mountain. Looking at the old man who was looking around in panic, Aegon frowned. The last time he ascended to heaven, he was listening to the angelic song. His body was bathed in holy light and his heart was at peace. For some reason, there was no singing or holy light at this moment. Even the gate of Mountain Paradise did not show any sign. The heroic spirit who came here would inevitably be confused. While thinking that, Aegon put on a gentle smile and introduced, "I am a guide from heaven. Fellow disciple, congratulations on being summoned by the Holy Mother to the heaven of the seven gods." "Ah, I'm in heaven." The tall old man with grey hair was not overjoyed. Instead, he was greatly shocked. Pointing at his nose, he asked, "Are you saying that I'm dead?" "What's your name? What was your title when you were alive? Why haven't I seen you before?" Seeing that Aegon was willing to chat with him, the old man was completely relaxed. "I'm from the Cox family in Hajin Saltworks town. My name is Quincy. I'm just a knight with a title." Quincy Cox from Saltworks town. Aegon frowned and thought for a while. He finally remembered this person. "Seven gods above, why didn't a coward like you go to the 7 levels of hell?" he exclaimed. Chapter 773. Quincy Cox was just a productive knight, one of the lowest-ranking nobles. King Aegon shouldn't have known about him. However, Quincy's fief was very special. Saltpan Town was one of the few sea trading towns in Hajin County. Old Quincy's deeds were also quite famous, he was notorious in Hajin County. Therefore, he was honored to be remembered by King Aegon. 7 gods above, why didn't you go to the 7 hells? Aegon didn't mince his words and expressed his thoughts completely. I had no choice." Old Quincy understood that Aegon probably knew about his deeds. However, he glanced at Aegon and complained in his heart, "I haven't asked you why you didn't go to the 7 hells. Impersonating Lei Jiazi is a much worse crime than me. I'm 65 years old this year. When I was alive, my intelligence had declined and I had no energy. Even walking was difficult. Those bloodsuckers were vicious. What could I do? You don't have a son. Also, where are your castle guards?" Aegon asked. "Woo-woo." Old Quincy cried when his son was mentioned. "I had 2 sons. They were both brave knights. If they were still alive, those bandits wouldn't have been able to do as they pleased." Aegon's heart skipped a beat. He could guess the cause of Quincy's son's death. The War of the 4 Kings. Yes. I received the conscription order from the King of the North, so I arranged for my 2 sons to go to Rapid City in my place. They took 200 guards with them, and then they all died. Their bodies are nowhere to be found. Old Quincy cried, "Although Saltpan Town has some assets, I'm just a productive knight. There are only a dozen or so old guards left in the castle. What's the use? My sons are all dead. They only left 2 granddaughters for me. I have to protect them. Everyone blames me for closing the castle gates and refusing to fulfill my duty as a noble to protect the commoners. But I also need protection. I pledged my loyalty to my lord. Why didn't my lord and king come to protect me?" Aegon fell silent. Old Quincy cried for a while and suddenly froze. He asked in confusion, "Wasn't my intelligence declining? How can my memory be so clear and my speech so flexible? Did you have dementia before?" Aegon asked curiously. Old Quincy shook his head. He's not demented. It's just that his brain is slow, like a rusty iron sword. This is heaven. All the illnesses and aging that you experienced in your life will no longer affect you in heaven. Even if you were blind in your previous life, you can recover your health in heaven, Aegon said matter-of-factly. Ah, this is heaven, Quincy said excitedly. Then, he asked in confusion, Your Majesty Aegon, please don't be angry if I tell you the truth. You can't be considered a saint, right? How did you become an angel after death? Actually, I'm just a proxy angel. Aegon blushed. Angels can act as a proxy. Quincy's jaw dropped. Oh, the real guide is the Holy Sparrow. Since there was no way to hide it, Aegon explained his identity as a temporary worker. Isn't Big Sparrow being too lazy? I'm a heroic spirit after all, and we're old friends. Big Sparrow has passed by my territory, and I've saved him countless times. Quincy grumbled. This was the truth. Big Sparrow had always been a barefoot monk in Hejin County, and had been to Salpan Town many times. Old Quincy was a devout knight of the old school, and he took good care of the night watchers and monks. I'm here to pick you up. What's there to be unhappy about? Aegon glared. When the two of them were still alive, old Quincy was his vassal. A lord picking up a vassal, how could he be worthy of him? Well, Salpan Town was too close to the valley. Old Quincy couldn't reject King Aegon's summons. If you were the real Lejiazi, your identity would be enough. But you're just a fake crown prince, a fake guide. No matter how dissatisfied old Quincy was, he didn't dare to say it out loud. Although the fake crown prince was a fake angel, the guide authority in his hands was real. After that, the two of them walked down the last flight of stairs in silence, and came to a vast grassland. As the guide, Aegon had the responsibility of helping the newcomers understand the structure of heaven. This is Holy Sparrow's Paradise Island. Standing at the edge of the island, Aegon pointed at the floating sky island, and repeated what Big Sparrow had told him that day. Can I go to other islands? It's best if it's an island from the time of Eris. Maybe I can find some old friends, or my son, or my parents. Old Quincy asked expectantly. Just like Aegon, he despised Big Sparrow's island for being too quiet. Aegon shook his head and sighed. Only the saints have the right to choose their own island. Then can I go visit my old friends? Old Quincy asked for the next best thing. It's difficult. You should find a piece of land and build your own house first. Then, Aegon taught him the technique of using the power of faith to create things. Ah, it's amazing. No wonder it's heaven. Old Quincy took a bite of the juicy green apple, and was moved to tears. I haven't eaten such a delicious apple in so many years. Aegon was confused. Long night just arrived, right? How come it's been so many years? Old Quincy grinned, revealing his neat white teeth. I didn't have teeth when I was alive. I couldn't chew it. Aegon's mouth twitched. Greetings, Lord Angel. Greetings, Lord Aegon. The two of them chatted as they walked, and before they knew it, they came to the labor area at the edge of the Third Ring Road. There were hundreds of men in black sweaters. When they saw Aegon, they stopped what they were doing and bowed to greet him. Ah, night watchers. Old Quincy's pupils contracted, and he was surprised. There are so many night watchers. Is it easier for night watchers to go to heaven? They didn't go to heaven. After they died, they were sent here by the stranger to stay temporarily. Aegon shook his head. Temporarily? Old Quincy was confused. You can temporarily stay in heaven? We sacrificed ourselves to protect the Seven Kingdoms. Her Majesty Dany Alice was kind and couldn't bear for us to reincarnate immediately. So, she begged the Holy Mother to arrange for us to stay in Mountain Paradise temporarily. When the long night is over and summer comes, the world will be peaceful again. Then, we will reincarnate. A skinny young night watcher shook his head and said, as the saying goes, it's better to be a Changxia dog than a man of the night. It's better to be a Changxia dog than a man of the night. Old Quincy thought about it carefully and said, who said that? It makes sense. Dogs have meat to eat in summer, and knights don't dare to eat bread in winter. The stranger said so. You've seen the stranger? What did he look like? Old Quincy was surprised. He wore a cloak and stood in the shadows. We couldn't see him clearly, the tall young man beside the skinny monkey said. Old Quincy nodded. He looked exactly like the stranger in the holy church. Why did so many of you die? He asked again. The skinny monkey looked him up and down and said, you're a noble, right? Why didn't you receive any messenger crows from the Great Wall? Well, Quincy was a bit embarrassed. I'm just a knight. My territory is small and I have no contact with the Great Wall. What happened to the Great Wall? There were thousands of knights like Quincy in the Westeros, and the Great Wall didn't even have 1,000 messenger crows. Other than the nobles in the northern region, the Great Wall would only send messages to dukes and some powerful counts. The Great Wall collapsed. The skinny monkey told him what happened that day. The Great Wall collapsed, millions of ghouls. Old Quincy was stunned. The 7 gods, can the Westeros stop them? With Her Majesty Dany Alice, the long night will definitely be ended. Yes, with the Dragon Queen, she has 5 Megalosaurus. The ghouls are afraid of fire, and the Megalosaurus are their nemesis. The night watchers were very confident. Quincy stared at the skinny monkey for a while and asked, you said you became a ghoul when you were alive. How can your soul still go to heaven? The Dragon Queen was merciful and summoned stranger to bring me here. No. Old Quincy waved his hand. I mean, you became a ghoul, your soul should have been. Aegon understood his doubts. When a person dies, their soul leaves the body, and then the body becomes a ghoul. The soul is not affected. But he's been dead for a few days. Yes, he was in stranger's country for a few days. What's the problem? Aegon said matter-of-factly. Old Quincy was also enlightened. The whole process was more complicated than they had imagined. The skinny monkey youth was Jaime. He died on the day the Great Wall collapsed. When Dany took care of the Minotaur and helped Blackie obtain Stranger's godhood, 2 days had passed since his death. Dany entered the world of death with Stranger's godhood and only found the remnant souls of a group of night watchers. If she had not used the spirit-bestowing spell to repair their souls, Jaime and the others would not have been able to regain their consciousness. After leaving the 3rd ring where the night watchers lived and entering the 2nd ring, Quincy frowned and said, there are only 5 holy spirits in heaven, but there are 700 to 800 night watchers temporarily living there. Isn't this a bit too much? He realized that other than himself and King Aegon, there were only 3 holy spirits who were qualified to go to heaven in the 2nd ring. As for the central ring, the great cathedral was surrounded by villas, but they were all empty. There was only the Holy Sparrow in such a large area. Even if Her Majesty Dany Liz is a holy disciple, how could she get so many night watchers? Old Quincy complained. She's treating heaven as her own home. Hearing the old knight say this about Dany's aunt, Aegon was angry but also embarrassed. Actually, it's all thanks to Dany Liz that I can go to heaven. He told the story of how he got into heaven through the back door with a straight face. This could not be kept a secret, and the Great Sparrow knew. The Great Sparrow was afraid that no one would know, so every holy spirit that came would tell the story of how Aegon got in through the back door. 7 gods above. How can you get into heaven through connections? Old Quincy's faith was about to shatter. Of course a holy disciple has special privileges. Otherwise, how can I manage such a vast paradise island? Old Quincy looked in the direction of the voice. It was a familiar old man, barefoot and wearing a white robe. He was tall and thin, and his hair was neatly combed back. He stepped on the soft grass and slowly walked over from the great cathedral. It was the Holy Sparrow. "Ah, Lord Archbishop, it's really you." Quincy was excited to see an old friend again. The Holy Sparrow smiled and nodded. "Sir Quincy, I've said it before. Your devotion to the 7 gods for decades will be rewarded one day." Hearing this, old Quincy tilted his head and looked at King Aegon, who got in through the back door. His expression was a little unnatural. Serving the 7 gods for a lifetime seemed to be more effective than getting in through the back door. "Look at this person. Heaven has personally descended to the mortal realm. What an honor." There were so many night watchers who had never been to the great cathedral. They had not even read the 7 Stars Bible. "How can you compare to Danny Leasy?" Old Quincy's face contorted. "John, I saw Aegon last night. It was 3 or 4 in the morning, and the sky was still dark. Well, it wouldn't be bright today anyway. In any case, he was woken up not long after they finished their exercise. When Sansa rushed in her pajamas and a white lion fur coat, the red-haired Ygritte was still naked in his arms. But Sansa was too excited. She didn't avoid the female savage's exposed body at all. She pounced on the side of the bed and patted her furry chest. She said excitedly, "I saw Aegon. John, Aegon came down from heaven to see me last night. It's over. Your sister has gone crazy." The female savage ran her fingers through her messy red hair and said in a frightened voice, "Sansa, you." John woke up from his daze and held his sister's hand worriedly. "Can't sleep, or did you have a nightmare? How about I get the scholar to make you a cup of poppy milk?" "I'm fine, very fine." Being called crazy by the female savage, Stark slowly regained her rationality. She glanced at the skinny red-haired woman. "Ygritte, I have something private to discuss with John. You can stay away for a while. You can stay here, but you must promise not to tell anyone. I'm not a blabbermouth. I did it for too long last night. I don't want to get up." The red-haired woman sprawled out on the duvet. There was a hint of curiosity in her small eyes. John blushed. "Sansa, Ygritte knows what's important. What do you want to say?" "I saw Aegon. Don't worry, I'm not crazy, and I'm not dreaming." "Okay, I'm dreaming, but my mind is clear. I know that I met Aegon in my dream." Ygritte's eyes lit up. She smiled. "Sometimes I know that I'm dreaming." Sansa ignored her and said excitedly to John, "You know that Aegon went to heaven, right? He came down from heaven." John was worried about his sister's feelings. He could only go along with her and asked carefully, "What did he say to you?" "So he could go to heaven because of Dany Rise. She was the one who sensed the fluctuation of Aegon's mark of the Paladin and knew that he was in danger. She prayed to the Holy Mother and used her status as the Holy Child in exchange for the Holy Mother to save Aegon from the evil gods." Sansa's eyes were like 2 small suns, reflecting a dazzling vitality. She came alive from the inside out. "And then?" John did not understand what she meant. "This means that Dany Rise has really forgiven Aegon." Sansa's head shook quickly. "No, not only has she forgiven him, she has acknowledged his identity as a Targaryen. Last night. I told you, right?" She admitted that Aegon is another branch of Targaryen. John frowned. "It's not the same. She sacrificed her status as the Holy Child for Aegon. Even an aunt wouldn't do this for her nephew, right?" Sansa said excitedly. John hesitated. "She didn't tell me about this. Maybe you dream about what you think about in the day." "You think I'm dreaming?" Sansa looked unhappy. You just said that you know you're dreaming, Ygritte mumbled. Aegon said that the night watchers who died in Eastwatch also went to heaven. Sansa said a lot of names of the night watchers. Jon, you were the commander-in-chief of the night watchers. You should know that I'm not wrong, right? Jon's expression was serious. He knew many of the people Sansa mentioned, but she definitely did not know. Could it be that the Holy Spirit had really descended? What did Aegon do? He asked curiously. He apologized to me. The excitement on Sansa's face was all gone. He said that he let me down. He left me with such a mess and a ruined reputation. Her eyes were red as she sobbed. I also apologized to him. I should have gone to see him. I should have saved him from Stannis. I should have. I shouldn't have let him leave this world in despair. Sigh, this is fate. Jon said bitterly. Sansa did not comment and continued, he also asked me to marry someone. He said that he would pray for me in heaven. At this point, Sansa could not hold it in anymore. She covered her face with her hands and wept softly. Jon patted her back gently and asked softly, what else did he say? It's all about heaven. He said that he's doing well now and told me not to worry. We might meet again in heaven in the future. Ygritte's eyes lit up. She asked excitedly, what does heaven look like? The old gods don't have a heaven. If the seven gods' heaven is real, I want to change my faith to the seven gods. Sansa ignored her. Jon glared at her. After breakfast, Dany finally met her fake niece-in-law in the glass garden behind the main castle. Yes, they had communicated through glass candles before, but it was the first time they met face to face. Her face was white and her eyes were red. Her thick red hair was tied up in a widow's knot. Her thin body and big belly made her look pitiful. Overall, she was much better looking than the tall and strong Sansa in Game of Thrones. Your Majesty. She bowed weakly to the Dragon Queen. She did not call her Aunt Dany anymore. Sigh, Winterfell is about to have a decisive battle. You should go and hide. The Dragon Queen's eyes were filled with pity and concern. The rest was solemn. Sansa was shocked. She did not care about acting pitiful anymore. She suddenly looked up and said anxiously, can't we defend Winterfell? Don't we have you and Stannis as the three gods? No one has seen the King of Strange Ghosts. We don't know what trump cards he has. I don't have the confidence to win against a completely unknown enemy. Dany was finally honest for once. You are not familiar with him, but Yasuo and Ahai's reincarnation should be familiar with him. Stannis is the legendary child of prophecy. The red-robed woman and the Light King have both acknowledged his identity. Since Yasuo and Ahai were able to defeat the King of Strange Ghosts last time, there is no reason they would not succeed this time. Sansa was panicking. She started to pray that the enemy who killed her husband would become the savior. Although she was not a true Stark, her love for Stark and Winterfell was no less than her brothers and sisters. That makes sense. In terms of familiarity with the King of Strange Ghosts, no one is more familiar than the Red God. Dany nodded and asked, what do you think about the future? I don't know. I don't even know where my child's future lies. Sansa was on the verge of tears and looked pitiful. Dany frowned and looked at her. In the north, there is the House of Phelant. The main house is the Phelant clan in the mountains. Outside of the main house, there is the Phelant of Stonebreak Mountain, the Phelant of Phelant's Finger, and the Phelant of Widow's Hope. After thousands of years, the four Phelant clans no longer have any disputes over inheritance. There is no difference between the main house and the branch house. In fact, as a former branch house, the Phelant of Widow's Hope is far more powerful than the other three combined. So, do you understand what I mean? Sansa could no longer pretend that she did not know the truth. Will you personally acknowledge our branch of Targaryens? She asked expectantly. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.